6 o'clock on the dot. It's Tuesday, 23rd of January. You're tuned into Breakfast here on GB News. Eamonn Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Very good morning to you. Here's what's leading the news this morning. Overnight, the UK and United States have conducted their second joint attacks on Houthi military targets in Yemen, striking an underground storage site, missile storage and surveillance facilities.
Isha out, Jocelyn in. Another day, another major storm set to sweep across the country, bringing with it heavy winds, rains and more travel chaos.
And Aidan McGivern has more weather updates throughout the show.
Hot on the heels of Storm Isha, today Storm Jocelyn hits the UK with winds strengthening overnight and causing further impacts. I'll have the full details in the forecast coming up soon.
OK, we'll be looking back and previewing Storm Jocelyn. That's the king. He will undergo surgery this week for an enlarged prostate, bringing attention to an issue that affects millions of men.
And Paul Coit is here with your sport today.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Owen Farrell has signed for Racing 92 in France. Did you know that? Which then affects his future for England, but we'll go into that. Wolves and Brighton draw, and Cam Norrie loses in the Australian Open, but he's happy, which is nice.
It's nice to be happy.
Absolutely.
Happy loser.
Yeah.
Hope you wake up today and you feel happy. You can join in any of our discussions. What's making you happy? Because I can't see it. Can't see
Well,
what's
I'll
out
tell you
there.
what's making me happy.
What?
We've got Robert Hardman on the show this morning.
Yeah.
That's the interview of the morning, frankly. I think it's
The
about
royal
20
author.
past 8. It's the royal author. If you've seen any royal scoops in the last week, they're pretty much all attributed to him, and he'll be sitting down with us a little bit later on.
He's a new book out about the king. GB Views at gbnews.com or tweet at GB News. Just to let you know, we'll get to the weather situation in just a moment, but first news overnight. The UK and the US have carried out their second joint airstrikes against Houthi targets in Yemen.
Yes, this follows 7 rounds of airstrikes on Houthi military sites by the US in recent days and comes after the UK took part in an initial joint strike operation earlier this month against the same group.
In a statement late last night, the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps said the latest round of strikes were in self-defence and they would deal another blow to the Iranian-backed militants.
Well, joining us now is military historian and defence analyst Chris Newton. Good morning to you. We've been hearing the warnings from the Foreign Secretary, from former army generals as well, that we are in a sort of 1939 moment here. It certainly seems, at the very least, that the Israel-Gaza conflict has spread into a regional crisis now.
Good morning. Yes, you're right there in terms of the Israel-Hamas conflict spreading into different areas. So you've got the Houthi attacks, which we've responded to overnight, and you've also got Iranian proxy groups conducting attacks on US bases and facilities in Iraq and Syria, and you've got cross-border attacks in Lebanon with Hezbollah as well. So yes, this conflict is widening, although these different theatres reflect sort of fighting and disputes before the war as well.
Tell me why the Houthis are sticking their nose into this. They're paying the price now. What are they trying to achieve?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. I mean, one theory is that it's the Iranians are, effectively directing all of this, and they're providing the Houthis with the intelligence, with the weapons as well, and therefore this is all part of kind of Iran's show of defiance and attempts to also put pressure on the Israelis as well. The Houthis as well. There could be, it's their kind of show of force as well. It's their kind of showing their capabilities, showing that they are an important actor in the region as well. But this is part of a kind of a tit for tat kind of scenario where the Houthis are launching attacks, and the US have been responding throughout the last week or so last week. So, and this is the second attack that the UK has joined, the second strike that the UK has joined. So this is part of a kind of an ongoing, running kind of clashes between the Houthis and the US, backed by the British and supported by others.
And if you looked into your crystal ball, is this now likely to escalate, or does this put paid to the Houthis?
I think the word I would use is that this is going to continue as it is. As the strikes last night, they're actually smaller in number compared with the strikes on the 11th of January, 11th, 12th of January. You've had, as I've mentioned, ongoing Iranian-backed militia attacks in Iraq and Syria. So I think this situation with the Houthis and its attacks on shipping, this is going to require constant management, constant containment of the Houthis. The aim is not to destroy the Houthis. The aim is to degrade their capabilities, and that kind of campaign requires constant management, constant kind of strikes such as this. So hopefully it would simmer. The strikes and the fighting will simmer as opposed to escalate. But there's always a danger for escalation as well.
Yeah, and of course that danger also impacting on prices as global supply chains get caught up in all of this. Really good to talk to you, Chris Newton, military historian and defence analyst. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, Storm Isha, which finished yesterday. We're going to get the tail end of that one, new one, Jocelyn, into the situation. Let's go to John Hammond, the meteorologist, on this one. John, is it more of the same, or how would you classify what is yet to come?
Yeah, I mean, no two storms are exactly the same, Eamon. There are some stark similarities between Isha and Jocelyn. Same sort of trajectory, same sort of impacts, wind and rain, and it's the same sort of parts of the country which will be affected by Jocelyn, who were worst affected by Isha. That said, I think everything will be a notch down in comparison with Isha, which has to be good news, doesn't it? But given that some places are still without power as we speak, what we're going to see over the next 24 hours is only going to hamper the recovery. Now, in terms of the actual weather that's going to hit us over the next 24 hours, first of all, rain. It's already pouring with rain again across Northern Ireland, and that wall of water is crossing the Irish Sea. So if you live across mainland Britain and it's dry where you are right now, it's not going to stay that way. That rain will soon sweep its way eastwards across just about the whole of the country through the morning and into the afternoon. Heavy rain too, some places seeing an inch or more of rain, which given the flooding we've seen over the last couple of days, ain't good news. One difference is with Isha we had a lot of snow melt into the mix, and that certainly exacerbated the flooding across parts of North Yorkshire, for example. That snow has now melted, so there's less snow to melt. But having said that, given that the ground is so saturated and the river levels are very high indeed, I think there will be further flooding again, particularly across the north and the west. Now, the rain will sweep through, and actually the wind doesn't really arrive. It doesn't peak until later on. So it's a sort of rain then wind event, and that rain will the wind will increase through the day, and that's going to peak into the night. A bit like Isha, the worst of the winds will be overnight tonight. Now, the gusts will be, again, a notch down on Isha, but across the more northwestern parts of the UK. So we're talking about Wales, Northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland, widely 50, 60, 70 miles an hour, and some places where we have the amber warning across the northwest of Scotland could see 80 plus. Now, that is enough to cause major damage. But for most places, the wind's not as strong, the rain not as relentless as it was with Isha, but it's going to be very interesting to see what sort of impacts we're going to see, given the damage which has been done to the infrastructure, given the amount of water there is out there, courtesy of Isha. So there's bound to be impacts, and by this time tomorrow, I'm sure you'll be showing footage up and down the country of some flooding and some wind damage from Jocelyn.
Yeah, and I suppose the risk to life as well. I mean, we're reporting 2 dead. If you count Ireland as well, which usually gets the brunt of the weather before it comes across to us, that death toll goes up to 5 from Isha. Is this the new normal? I'm reading that this is what, we have to get used to now.
Well, that's a difficult one to sort of pick out the details of trends, because last winter there weren't many storms at all. This winter we're getting bombarded by storm after storm. So in terms of winds, there's no clear trend in terms of our climate getting windier. What there is a trend for is rainfall. Rainfall is becoming more intense because the air, because it's warmer now, holds more water. So when it rains harder. So it's very difficult to pick out trends in terms of wind strength. Is our climate becoming windier? Question mark. Is our climate becoming wetter? Most definitely, and particularly in wintertime. So we're tending to get droughts and heat waves in the summer and intense thunderstorms in the summer. In winter, we're trending to get less in the way of snowfall, more in the way of intense rainfall. And yeah, I'm afraid in terms of our resilience, we're going to have to get used to this sort of climate in the future. It does mean, of course, when we've got all this wind and rain coming in off the Atlantic, there's no sign of anything particularly cold. So last week we were talking about intense cold and snowfall. There is no sign of anything particularly cold in the next 10 days. I'd be very surprised if snowfall is going to be an issue through the rest of this month and into the first few days of February. So you pay money, you take your choice. Do you want intense cold and snowfall, or do you want wind and rain?
Well, I suppose
something in
with
between
the wind
would be nice, wouldn't it?
With the wind, you get the wind turbines, turning, and a bit of energy independence. So there's got to be a silver lining in there somewhere. John Hammond, thanks very much.
Okay. Must be, listening to John there, it must be so demoralising, I think, for repair crews.
Do you know what I was thinking?
Out and about. I mean, they no sooner get pylons fixed again and roads
Rails.
cleared and whatever, and yet it's going to happen again tonight, and it's all their good work is going to be undone in so many places. And then we talk about flooding, and it'll be no time at all before we've got drought orders in effect as well. And see the complete mess that the utility companies...
just go from crisis to crisis.
Yeah, the utility companies have our whole waterways, and they can't handle the water coming in, and they can't keep the water. They can't dig holes in the ground and keep all this water that's coming down and keep it for the summer months. So the whole place is in a state of chassis, it has to be said. 12 minutes past the hour of 6. It is a Tuesday morning. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel. We're online, we're on your television, we're on your radio, and just say to your device, play GB News, and lo and behold, we will be there.
Here are the news stories making the headlines this morning. A breakthrough in detecting Alzheimer's. Scientists have revealed a new blood test which can detect the condition 10 to 15 years before a patient shows any symptoms. By 2030, more than 1 million people are expected to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia in Britain, and it's hoped that early detection and this new treatment could help to tackle those symptoms.
Farmers are calling on MPs to support tougher regulations to protect them from what they're calling unfair treatment by the big 6 supermarkets. A dozen scarecrows were placed outside Parliament as MPs will debate reforms to the grocery supply chain. It's after 110,000 people signed a petition urging the government to overhaul the grocery supplies code of practice.
And Republican voters in the US state of New Hampshire are heading to the polls later today to decide their candidate for November's general election. With Ron DeSantis now out of the race, the vote will come down to former President Donald Trump and former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. The ex-US president currently leads the race, which could set up a rematch with Joe Biden for presidency at the end of the year.
A health question which we're going to be debating later in the programme. Question is, would you swallow a balloon the size of a grapefruit to help shed the pounds? Well, it's not the size of a grapefruit when it goes in your mouth. There's few people with the mouth that could swallow a grapefruit. But what it is, it's the size of a stone, really, and then it goes into you, and then they blow it up and it fills your tummy and it makes you feel full. And so we're talking about this. Is this something that you would take and you would do?
Yeah, let us know your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, the leader of Reform Party and GB News regular, Richard Tice, has taken a weekend road trip all the way to Ukraine.
He's travelled 1,400 miles across snowy Europe to get to the front line in Ukraine to deliver much-needed medical supplies and equipment.
Well, he joins us now to tell us more. Good morning to you, Richard. Where exactly are you and what's it like where you are?
Good morning to you both. I'm in central Ukraine, and if you can hear a noise there, that is the end of this morning's air raid siren alert. I was woken a couple of hours ago, and we went down to the air raid shelter and spent a little bit of time down there. All came through on the app. And quite interesting sort of double use of an air raid shelter. Eamonn, you'll be pleased to know that it doubles up as the wine cellar. And that seemed a very appropriate use. But we've done a big trip, 9 vehicles, pickup trucks, full of medical supplies. We set off from Northamptonshire on Saturday morning at about 6:30, drove those 400 miles. It was very snowy across all of Northern Europe, but we got here safe and sound. And yeah, all of these 9 trucks full of highest quality medical supplies that we'll be delivering today to frontline soldiers from various battalions.
Richard, you don't have to do this. Why are you doing it?
Some friends of mine said they were doing it. Eamonn, they'd done 4 trips so far. This is their 5th trip. There's a picture of the group. That's the vehicle that I've been driving across. And I wanted to help. I wanted to do my bit, play my part. So I've raised a bit of money and, learn a huge amount of lessons along the way. And I feel that it's an important part. We can all play our part in different ways. And this is a seriously important battle to defend Ukraine, and I think it's absolutely right that we help the Ukrainians. I've never been in a country that's a war zone before. It's a very strange feeling. Life goes on, but as we learned this morning, we heard this morning, the air raid siren goes, and you have to adapt your day.
It's a world away, and yet it's only 400 miles. I mean, it's nothing at all. That's Belfast to Dublin 4 times, and yet everything is different. The world changes, people's perspectives change, the danger changes as well. What is it like, leaving Northamptonshire and then, obviously 400 miles later, being in a war zone?
1,400, not 400, Eamonn.
Oh, sorry, I thought that was short.
The honest answer is, Eamonn, it actually feels a bit weird. It really does. As I say, I've never been into a war zone before. People are going around daily lives, but there's a curfew. When you check in the hotel, you're given a room key, you're given the Wi-Fi, and you're given the air raid siren app on your phone. So it's for real. And first thing this morning, that's what happened. So yeah, it just feels very different. But lives go on. People are bustling around, going to work, and there's the same potholes here as you see in England. That's just the nature of life, however difficult it is.
Yeah, and Richard, is there a little bit of political capital in this for you? I mean, I suppose most people would not associate reform with caring too much about international politics and all of these sorts of things.
Far from it. I've been a staunch supporter of Ukraine in its defence, in protecting its sovereignty from the moment that it was illegally invaded by Russia, and we've got very clear views and policies about Ukraine, about what's going in the Middle East, as you would expect from a political party that's going up in the polls. But sadly, this war here has been going on now for very nearly 2 years. This is my first visit, and I just felt delivering medical supplies, high quality supplies, just felt an appropriate thing to do. And as I say, I'm here with a team of about 16 others, and the 9 vehicles, all pickup trucks from the UK, they get camouflaged and then taken to the front line with the supplies and used by the soldiers, and they're very grateful for it.
You're not on the front line, but nonetheless, you are there, as you say, you're in that war zone. Do you feel unsafe?
I don't feel unsafe, Eamonn. It's just you just know that this is it's a very serious different place. And it's important to understand that. And I'm grateful that I've been able to help in a small way and understand it at the same time.
And what do you say to those, and there seemed to be a sort of growing mood of people beginning to say that they think the war is actually a hoax, and that actually it's money laundering, and that this isn't a legitimate concern. Would you dispel that this morning?
Well, I've had it for real this morning, Isabel, because the air raid siren's gone off. I've got it on my app. I see how and when these sirens go off. I can see that they've been going off sort of every other day, different parts of this country. Look, it's absurd to say it's a hoax. Every country has its challenges with the way that it's run, but the reality is that Ukrainian soldiers are dying every day on the front line, trying to defend their nation. We're here with a Ukrainian who's helped facilitate the trip, and what we've learnt is extraordinary, just quite extraordinary. So yeah, this is for real, and this is the consequences of geopolitics when it works and when it doesn't work.
Can I just ask a final question, just occurring to me as I was just about to say goodbye, but obviously the impact on net migration is significant in this, because we have taken in a large cohort of Ukrainians. Quite rightly, most people would agree. Where does that stop? What's Reform's position in all of that? How long can these people stay, do you think?
So I think that's a really good question. We don't know how, sadly, Isabel, we don't know how long the war is going to last. Many Ukrainians are making a home in the United Kingdom, but many want to come back to their own country and to restart their lives again. And this trip, there are many other of these volunteer trips that are similar, and actually they have been helped by Ukrainian ladies in the United Kingdom, in and around the Midlands. So they're playing their role, helping their motherland, helping their country in the way that we're doing.
Well, good luck with what you're doing. Please do stay safe, and I hope it's not long before you're back here in the relative safety of this the studio, and we're talking to you face to face.
Yeah, good for you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Very
well
much.
done. Well done. Thank you. Richard Tice there, who's the leader of Reform UK. 22 minutes now past the hour, with Storm Jocelyn on the way, due to strike probably, we reckon, around tea time tonight. Here's your weather update. Aidan McGivern with that.
Hello, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. This time yesterday, we were reeling from Storm Isha. Today, it's all about Storm Jocelyn, the next storm on the way, bringing spells of rain and then increasingly strong winds overnight tonight. First of all, it's a dry start in the east, doesn't last long. Rain sweeps across the country, heaviest over Western Hills, where there could be some issues for central and southwest Scotland, as well as northwest England, 40 to 60 millimetres of rain falling in some places. Not as much rain towards the southeast, but still dull and damp. It is mild, however, despite the wet and increasingly windy weather, 12 or 13, perhaps even 14 Celsius possible. But the winds really start to ramp up as we end the afternoon and go into the evening. Widely 55 to 65 miles an hour for the northern two-thirds of the country, particularly western coasts and hills. But for the north and west of Scotland, a swathe of 80-mile-per-hour gusts move through overnight. And now, this is more of a normal winter storm compared with Storm Isha, not as powerful, but coming so quickly after Isha could hamper recovery and repair efforts. That's why this one has been named. That's why there is an amber warning for the north and west of Scotland. It stays blustery into tomorrow morning. A bright start in the south, further showers to come for Northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland. The most frequent showers will be across the north and west of Scotland with a continued strong wind, but the winds will be coming down through the day, and with some brightness in the south, feeling a little more pleasant. Highs here of 11 to 12 Celsius, a bit cooler further north.
Still to come, a piece of political history. Later today, items belonging to the late Speaker in the House of Commons, Betty Boothroyd, will go under the hammer to raise money for charity.
Yes, you're tuned into Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel. Stay tuned.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there, with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, at the start of the programme today, I said there's very little to make anybody happy these days. Bear in mind the world geopolitical crisis all around the world and the weather and whatever. So in answer to the question, what makes you happy? Steve says not waking up with another 6 fence panels being trashed by the wind. I get that, yeah, that'd be okay. John says, if the government was to let me work and I get to keep more of what I have earned, that would make me happy. And Wesley in Georgia says, many things make me happy. One of those things is simply tuning into breakfast on GB News and to see Eamonn Holmes.
No,
what?
Read it correctly.
What? To see...
Breakfast on GB News, to see the both of you in action. You are both awesome.
There you are.
Thanks, Wesley.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Wesley. That's very good.
That makes us happy. So there we go.
Makes us very,
like
very happy. We're just happy that anybody's watching, which is really good.
There's a lot of people watching, I'll have you know.
How do you fancy getting your hands on some pieces of political history once belonging to the trailblazing politician Baroness Betty Boothroyd?
Well, items from her estate are being auctioned off today, a week on from her memorial service, and they're expected to fetch more than £200,000 for charity.
Oh, there was a big yellow thing on the autocue there, which sort of made me think...
That was it.
That was it.
No.
But obviously it's not it. We now tell you, GB News presenter Pip Thompson has been poring over the possessions of the woman known to the public as Betty and to MPs as Madam.
Order! 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 All of you! Order!
With her fearless, no-nonsense attitude, the late Baroness Betty Boothroyd commanded respect throughout Westminster and beyond. The first ever woman Speaker of the House of Commons and a Labour MP for nearly 30 years, she led a life drenched in politics. So it's not surprising that her estate's attracting plenty of interest and bids when it goes under the hammer today.
So many items here, but what is proving most popular currently?
Well, I think the dispatch box is very popular. That lovely black leather. It's cabinet made. That's what we've got to understand. These dispatch boxes aren't just off the shelf. Oh, the ring. They're almost 10 carat, 9.97 carats of brilliant cut diamond. It is immensely special. I've been in the jewellery trade for 30 years now, and I've not seen a ring that big before. From a ring to a waste paper bin is also very popular. It's proving that a lot of people like a pussycat bin. It's actually designed by somebody called Fornasetti, an Italian design house from the 1960s. It's quite interesting. You've got this whole gamut of goods here relating to Baroness Boothroyd, from her political life to her sense of fun to her clothes, and then we've got her domestic items.
This remarkable insight into Betty Boothroyd's life stretches to 224 lots. There's her collection of power suits and glamorous dresses for those official photo calls with royalty and heads of state. early campaigning literature and photos, including when she was first elected as an MP for West Bromwich in 1973. And her own personal photo albums, featuring images of her at home in Thriplow in Cambridgeshire and on holidays and official trips all over the world. There's also a souvenir programme from the inauguration of John F. Kennedy, signed by the President himself, which is estimated to go for up to £500.
One of the loveliest aspects of this is that, yes, you get to see the very public side of the late Betty Boothroyd, but also a glimpse into her private life. This is a box set of Columbo. She was a massive fan. And if you come this way, here's Betty's bust, which she had specially commissioned. It's expected to fetch around £500. But actually, she hated it, and she hid it in her garden.
Something else we're learning about Baroness Boothroyd is that she had a fascination with frogs. Kermit was found in her bedroom, and this little lot was all in her toilet. Baroness Boothroyd died last year, aged 93, with her memorial service held just last week. She never married despite receiving a number of offers, nor had children. Her estate's expected to raise more than £200,000, with proceeds divided between half a dozen charities. It's a chance to own a slice of political history and remember a woman of conviction who loved Parliament, and Parliament loved her.
When I was a backbencher, it certainly never happened in my time, and I wish we could get back to those good old days.
Pip Thompson, GB News.
What a character.
What a character. They don't make him like that anymore.
No, and they don't make a lot of that stuff that she's flogging now anymore. There's money in muck, I'll tell you.
There is, a blooming is, isn't there? You know, when we saw the Roger Moore, they did it with Roger Moore recently, didn't they? I think I'd rather have Roger Moore's backgammon set than Betty Boothroyd's Scrabble. And I don't mean that, in an insulting way, but you know what I mean?
Horses for courses.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is.
Well, I hope it does well for charity.
Yeah.
Paul's here, and what have you got sports-wise?
Owen Farrell, England captain, well, not anymore because he's off to France. Racing 92 in Paris. There's been talk about this for a while. So the Six Nations is coming up. And he said he would step away from the Six Nations and to see how things go. But now he's off to Paris. He'd been at Saracens since he was 17. But, you know, that's where the big money is. So he's going to be playing over in France, £1 million a year contract. But the most important thing is, and I'm still find this strange, is that it excludes him from playing for England. Because if you decide to go over to play in France, Jack Willis has done it, Joe Marchant, Jack Noel, Sam Simmons as well, all playing the top 14 in France, it means that you can't play for England anymore. Now, I understand the reason England do this is because they want to keep players in the country and they want to keep them playing in the league, and therefore, and that's the only way you can play for England. But when there's money around and there's big money around, it's like football. You know, they're going to be wanting to go off and play elsewhere, and then that will lessen the national side.
Such a shame.
It is a shame.
I think possibly his treatment in the recent tournament perhaps contributed to this decision, because he was really criticised,
he was vilified,
and it affected his mental health. And
it's certainly undeserved because 112 caps, record point scorer as well for England, 32 years old. And it's said that, well, maybe after that then he can come back. But then if he comes back and then there's another World Cup, 35, I think that will be it. Now, the British and Irish Lions, his dad Andy is the coach of. And so it's also a question whether he can play for them. But I don't think there's much doubt. I can't see that that's going to be a problem, that he can play for the British and Irish Lions. The fact that he's playing in France. So that's something else. But anyway, we wish him well. And there's the Netflix behind-the-scenes documentary, which is out tomorrow. They've done it on everything else, on cycling and
you know what? I sort of
Formula
slightly
One
dread
and
the
football.
Six Nations because I've become a rugby widow. My husband already said, by the way, you're just not going to see me for the duration of the Six Nations. Now there's a Netflix doco for him to get his ticket. Starts tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. Yeah. Well, shall we just keep that between us then?
Let's not tell anyone.
Full contact.
OK, so it was goalless between Brighton and Wolves in the Premier League.
Cancelled each other out.
Last night, Carabao Cup semi-final. Chelsea trailing to Middlesbrough. That's going to happen at Stamford Bridge tonight. That's the semi-final second leg.
Should be good,
8 o'clock.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But do you hear what Mauricio Pochettino said yesterday? Love this. So Mauricio Pochettino, the Chelsea manager, has blamed, because there's a flat atmosphere, obviously, at Stamford Bridge, the way they're doing. So what he's done is blamed the last two managers on the flat atmosphere, Frank Lampard and Graham Potter. It's like they were still booing them when I was on. So he's blaming the fact that it's flat there, not the fact that they've had terrible results. They've had 8 defeats and 1 loss in 11 games. There's nothing to do with that, the crowd, and I love Maurizio, but he's blaming the crowd's reaction to the last two managers, not on anything he's done. That always works for me. Blame someone else.
Tuchel was a manager there, and I hear heavy rumours about him being connected to Man United.
Really? I don't know whether that's the right thing for Manchester United. I'll tell you the other one as well is Roy Hodgson at Crystal Palace. I wonder, Roy's 77, and Roy's been on here with us, and I love Roy, but I don't think it's going to last that much longer with Crystal Palace. The crowds aren't very happy. There was talk about Graham Potter, who was seen at the last game, so I think the good money's going to be on Graham Potter going into Crystal Palace, which would be great for Crystal Palace, and I think that's probably what's going to happen. How soon, we'll have to see. Little bit of Australian Open as well. Cameron Norrie, we were talking about him yesterday, ended up losing in 5 sets yesterday to Alexander Zverev. It was the longest match of his career. He was kind of happy with how it went. It went right the way through to a tie-break at the end of the 5th, but he's satisfied because he's playing well. And one more, Taylor Fritz. You're familiar with the work of Taylor Fritz?
I love all her records.
Taylor Fritz, I love her too. Yeah. This Taylor Fritz, you got a Swift and you got a Fritz. This is the Fritz. This is the guy. Fritz. Okay. Never, ever mix up your Swifts and your Fritzes because it can get you in all sorts of trouble.
Okay.
Taylor Fritz, the American tennis player, beat Stefanos Tsitsipas. There he is playing there.
He's my favourite.
Who, Fritz or Tsitsipas?
Tsitsipas.
Well, I'm sorry, but who is he, Eamonn? Stefanos?
Tsitsipas.
That's him.
Go on, Eamonn.
I don't know any of them.
God, I just liked your pronunciation last time.
Greek god.
His girlfriend, this is Taylor Fritz, his girlfriend, Morgan Riddle. Now, he's holding there, just to let you know, he's holding, that's a little jar of Vegemite. Vegemite, because his girlfriend, Morgan Riddle, there's Morgan, made a promise that she would eat a whole jar of Vegemite if Taylor won.
That she's
I'll tell you what the gesture is. It's either one of three. She's either saying, I'll only have a small jar of Vegemite. Yeah. She's also maybe referring to the chances of him beating Novak Djokovic in the next round, or she's referring to Taylor Fritz. Take your pick.
Stop it.
I'm not really sure which one of the three.
For those listening on the radio, she's gesturing a very sort of small...
You're talking about the radio, and then you're actually doing it with your fingers.
Yeah, I don't know how to describe it with my fingers.
Yes.
But yeah.
What is Vegemite? Is it like
Vegemite? You know Vegemite. There's a song in Down Under by Men at Work. For a man down under and a Vegemite sandwich. A Vegemite sandwich is in the song. It's like what's?
It's Marmite, but
it's Marmite. Yeah. It's like your Australian Marmite.
But all I would know is you'd be the expert on it because, of course, we all think you're Australian deep down.
Yes, of course. Yeah. I'm really not sure.
First time Eamonn met Paul, he said, "Who's that Australian guy?"
Yeah.
No, I wrote to your boss here and I said...
I like that Australian.
Yes, I said, the Australian's very good. Sport.
And it took them 3 months to actually find out that it was me. They were employing all these Australians doing sport on this TV station.
Very good. See you again shortly, my friend.
Great to see you. Have a lovely day.
Good day. Good day. Thank you very much indeed. Still to come, we'll be taking a look at the front pages and the top stories with Claire Muldoon and Lewis Oakley. That's next.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Let's see how the newspapers are shaping up on this Tuesday morning. Daily Express front page leads with a new Alzheimer's blood test set to bring us closer to a cure. Going to be talking about that next.
The Daily Telegraph, leading with the same story this morning, hopes that it will be a revolution in the treatment of the disease.
The Mail leads with Keir Starmer being accused of relentlessly politicising British life as he pledged to defend organisations that go woke. And the picture there... Oh, sorry. See, itchy fingers there. I'm going to be talking about that picture. That is, do you know who that is wearing those glasses?
Is that J-Lo?
It's J-Lo there.
Ridiculous glasses. Sorry.
No, it's not
You're going to
good.
get some.
Not good. They're not good.
Oh,
they're not even attractive. They're not attractive. But anyway, it gets their front page of the papers as well. Please, Robin, move on to the next paper.
They're focusing on the storm in the eye. They call it the worst in a decade, and that it will become the norm.
Guardian leads with medics being urged not to report illegal abortions to police.
And we're going through the papers this morning with the broadcaster and journalist Claire Muldoon and the writer and podcaster Lewis Oakley. Good morning to both of you.
Morning.
Claire, let's start with some good news for once. And This really feels like a revolution on the horizon. Not only is there better treatment for Alzheimer's certainly being trialled, but now this blood test that could spot your likelihood of getting it 15 years early.
Is that good news?
I think that's great news. You can make adjustments and hopefully change the pattern of your life.
Well, I think it is really good news because, unfortunately now, if to get a diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's, you as the patient, obviously you've been told by your family and friends that something might be amiss, but you have to have the clarity of mind to go and seek the treatment in the first instance. Like, refer yourself via your GP to a memory clinic. And lots of people with the beginnings of Alzheimer's don't want to do that because they're in denial. They wouldn't even, sometimes they would forget their symptoms. But this is fantastic because it's a blood test and it's non-invasive, which means it's not like the lumbar puncture to test the proteins that build up in the brain that adds to Alzheimer's and causes Alzheimer's. Now, we know there might be a hereditary gene involved in all of this. We're not sure. But, you know, for people like my father had Alzheimer's and subsequently died from lung cancer, but because the symptoms were masked, he couldn't articulate how he was feeling, his dementia masked all of those symptoms, and that's what made it worse. And it will also be really good for those, you know, the discussions that we need to have about vascular dementia, Alzheimer's. What's the difference? What's the difference in treatment? Are they different? Well, you know, but this treatment is very good and they're going to roll it out to over 50s as a statutory NHS offer of a test. Now, I know sometimes people might say, well, it's best not to know if you've got this predilection to Alzheimer's because it will only cause worry and perhaps bring on the onset quicker. But my view is, if you get tested, and these tests are going to pinpoint the tau proteins in the brain, they can actually help lead to a well-documented, good tablet to take it and hopefully cure it in the future.
Well, here, absolutely, OK, take on board everything you say. But, Lewis, here is the NHS being asked, Claire was saying, to roll this out to over 50s, free of charge, on the NHS. This is another service the NHS is being asked to provide, and it's not funded for.
Yeah, I mean, that's the issue, isn't it? Although we're looking at, I think it was by 2030, 1 million people will be suffering with this. So it is something that we have to sort of get ahead of. It's also something that maybe if we invest in upfront, as Claire's saying, we might get new cures, new ways of handling the issue. I think the thing that did jump out to me, though, is that idea that you would know 10 to 15 years earlier. And whilst, you know, I guess that's a good thing, I just think if that were me, if I were told in 10 or 15 years' time this is what you're going to be facing, I just think they're going to never sleep again.
Yes, but knowledge is power. You can get your house in order, you can make sure that your family are cared for if the worst case happens, you can change any of the mitigating factors. You know, we know sleep is an issue, we know that if you play lots of Sudoku and things, that helps with all that. You would just give yourself a fighting chance. You know, I personally would prefer to know, but I think that just boils down to your approach to life. Control issues. Maybe. Yeah, or maybe it's just sensible.
But think about it as well, even from the NHS point of view. If they do this, it's quite a cheap test because it's going to be a finger prick more than an invasive vial or the lumbar puncture, but it'll actually save in the back end of it, if people can make the adjustments, as Isabel suggested, and then it'll be good for family and friends of those suffering. So they will then know. And at the end of the day, it's a risk factor. You know, you're put into a risk category. You want to minimise the risk and live your life.
OK, let's move on and talk about, we had a storm in yesterday, we have another one coming tonight. Were you affected by the storms at all, Lewis?
Not really. I mean, I heard the wind outside, and I've got 2 young kids, and we've got one of those double prams, and it actually does make me nervous because we've seen trees come down and stuff. So you're kind of walking around with your pram, being like, "Please, God," like looking at every tree, like it could be dangerous. But then, you know, we live in London. It's never too terrible in London. It's really the more rural and the more north you go that it's worse. I was talking to my other half yesterday, and I was saying, actually, it hasn't been that bad of a winter. It's been quite warm. We had one cold week, I think, but actually, the further you go, I mean, the flooding, the chaos with travel, especially in Scotland, where they just say, well, we just can't run any services. That's just where we are.
Well, they're used to that in Scotland, unfortunately, because the SNP killing the transport infrastructure. ScotFail, it's called.
Well, if you include the Republic of Ireland, 5 killed in Storm Isha, and it's not often we say that, and worrying, because a lot of trees will have been weakened by the relentless storms. I think this is the 10th named storm in just 5 months on its way. So, you know, there is concern. And, of course, those people waking up this morning still without electricity. Luckily, the temperatures, it's not so cold as it was last week. But
well, I think the thing here is, you know, we always hear, you know, why can't we handle bad weather in the UK? And the truth is because we have it so infrequently, we didn't build for it. But as the articles are suggesting, well, this might become the norm, we might have to start building for it.
I love when people say we so infrequently. Throughout my whole life, I can remember just bad weather stories. I don't think this is all...
It's not a new norm.
No, it's not. It's not a new norm, and it's not, well, what are we doing and what's happening and when's the next one going to be? So it has always been.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I
You're watching Flood on ITV?
No.
Oh, it's very good.
Is is it not called After the Flood?
Yes.
Yes, because you get it right. Yes.
Oh,
so
right, OK.
Flood could have been about Noah's Ark.
Oh, well, I had this sort of name in it.
Yeah. Well, yes, I did watch the first episode.
I'm working with 2 control freaks today.
Details. Claire, let's talk about abortions.
Yes.
The Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynaecologists have come out with, I suppose, a controversial view, saying that doctors and other healthcare staff should not report illegal abortions because they say prosecutions are never in the public interest. From the front of the Guardian.
Yeah, it is, and I actually agree with it. I don't agree with abortion, but that's a whole other issue because my first stance is pro-life in everything. But I think there's reasons why this is a very important report to highlight. Since 2022, at least 6 women have been reported to the CPS and, you know, in case they had an illegal abortion. But in the previous 20 years, that's a long time, there was just 3. Now, the reason is, I say, because of the availability of home abortions from COVID, where the abortion pills were sent to the women's homes and they could take them. Now, what this is saying is that healthcare providers, if that were to go wrong, then there would be a case that an illegal abortion had been performed because the government, the ruling in this country is that an abortion is legal up to 24 weeks. It has to be signed off by 2 doctors. And in this instance of the pills being sent, then that wouldn't be the case. And things can go wrong with that.
You think people are doing these at-home abortions when they're beyond the date?
Well, there was one. There was a very famous case last year of the woman who did that.
In later pregnancy,
yes.
And that prosecution, was she sent to jail, and then her... her prosecution, what do you want to call it? Her sentence was overturned.
In all of this, it's always women's rights. Women's rights. What about the rights of the unborn child? What about the rights of the innocents in all of this? And I think that's what the law has to protect. So women are vessels. They're carrying these children from conception through to birth, but also sometimes it's 1 in 4 pregnancies actually end in miscarriage. So then you add that into the factor as well. So that's the problem, because women are presenting with issues after, if it was a natural miscarriage or an abortion, and then the healthcare provider will think, well, gosh, what did happen? Was that an illegal abortion? That's where the grey area is, and that's where the issue is.
But is this not telling the doctors, or putting them in a bit of a position that don't say anything? Surely they should be able to use their own judgment to say, look, this is what I think has gone on here, and report it.
It's protected under female mutilation, genital mutilation. They're allowed to access medical records and report that to the police. But normal NHS records for obstetrics or gynaecology, you're not allowed to, and you ought not to, disclose any patient's details to local authorities, especially police.
Keir Starmer was accused of relentlessly politicising British life as he pledged to defend organisations that go woke. Tell us more, Lewis.
Yes, this is the Labour leader. A bit of an odd flex, I would think, because even the furthest left people I know will occasionally have a problem with the woke agenda and something that comes up and, oh, we can't say that now. So the idea that this is all just a Tory idea that they're just making it up to win votes was a bit of an odd thing. I think everyone knows that actually there is a change in the atmosphere of what you can and can't say and the way in which we have to look at the past. And also the idea that, you know, the Tories aren't good on this. Their track record after 14 years, it's woker than ever. So it's not like they have a good track record on it. I think his position here should have been that he's the adult in the room, able to have the conversations about, well, actually, you know, maybe it is time to change with the times, and maybe this isn't appropriate now.
So he's leaning into the culture wars in all of this, and do you think it's done him any political good, or do you think the public are on the side of the Tories in all of this?
Well, I don't think it's about Labour or Conservative on this.
Okay.
I think a lot of people in their own lives think, actually, why can't I say this now? Why is this changing? And we need to have proper discussions about it.
Look, this is from a man who took the knee for Black Lives Matter. I'd say all lives matter. This is the man that said he couldn't even define what a woman was. Right? And so we're supposed to understand or believe that he's leaning into the wokeness now or away from the wokeness? No, the guy is just an absolute charlatan, in my view.
We are just trying to establish comms with a Labour shadow health minister, and we will speak to them about this in just a moment, Karen Smith, but almost there in terms of setting that up, and we will indeed ask her about that specific issue. But whilst we wait, Claire, should we talk about energy drinks?
Yes.
Eamonn and I were reading this. Apparently, if you drink 1 energy drink a month, it will impact negatively on your sleep.
Well, I don't know why people are surprised at this.
1 a month, though.
I mean,
does coffee count as an energy drink?
Well, I've never... Have you actually had any of these energy drinks?
No.
Like Red Bull, Monster, or anything like that? Lucozade. And they do impact. And what this study has found is that it was done on Norwegian students, 53,000 of them, and 18 to 35s who consumed the drinks every day slept around half an hour less than those drinking them occasionally or not at all. But within that set of data, they also have rising, well, insomnia, more than half an hour, higher anxiety levels, and they just can't seem to concentrate. And I think these things should come with a government health warning. They're actually looking now to ban the selling of the drinks for under 18s. And I'm really, really pleased that my kids had never really bought into it. Although Tom was like after sports or something, he would like to have an energy drink. And when Monster was out, that was a very big thing.
OK, Claire and Lewis, thank you both very much indeed.
We don't need any energy drinks. We've got enough.
If only that were the case. If only that were the case.
We're joined now by Karen Smith this morning, speaking to us particularly, I think, about the NHS. But I want to start, good morning to you, by asking you about the developing picture overnight, these strikes strikes on the Houthi rebels. I understand that Sir Keir Starmer and the Speaker of the House of Commons, neither of them were notified of these strikes, unlike the first one last week. Why was that, and are you happy about it?
We don't know why the government haven't spoken to us on the usual terms. We would expect them to do that, and we would certainly expect a statement by the Prime Minister today in Parliament, so we will await developments on that today.
I think this strike and not the previous 6 US strikes have involved the UK. Is it strange, do you think, to have been involved in that initial strike and then not involved, and then at 8 o'clock last night this call coming in to Rishi Sunak from the President of the United States? A lot of questions, I think, need to be answered about why we're getting involved in some strikes and not others.
I think that we were involved, that's right, and that was absolutely appropriate way for the government to act in consultation with Keir Starmer, and we would expect that to happen. We wait to hear from the government today, and we do want to hear from them in Parliament, and would expect to be briefed on the usual terms.
The news overnight was on the first sort of challenge, I suppose, to the Prime Minister's Rwanda bill by the Lords, his bill being voted against there. The Prime Minister sort of firing a warning shot, though, earlier in the week, saying appointed Labour peers really ought to listen to the will of the people. Is that message being missed, do you think?
Well, the amendment last night in the Lords was a cross-party amendment that basically offered the same safeguards that the government said they wanted. So why they didn't just accept that amendment is not really very clear. Obviously, they do have more peers in the Lords to make things go through, but really they need to, work with them to accept what they've already said and get on, in the way that they obviously can do, because they do have that majority. So this was a fairly straightforward amendment for the government, which I'm not really sure why they didn't accept last night in the Lords, unless they want to look like they want to make a point about the Lords.
OK. You wanted to talk this morning about war on NHS waste, billions of pounds being thrown away. How do you propose to change that?
So that's what we want to focus today on, a speech in that, for example, £200 million already spent in the NHS on paper, a decade after Jeremy Hunt said that he would abolish and make a paperless system. But it's not just the money in the NHS that is not being spent wisely. What we want to focus on really is what that means for patients, because we have a system, for example, in outpatients that is recognised decades old, whereby patients, 1 in 5 patients, don't even know they've got an appointment. It's like a black hole after you go to your GP for that referral, and patients aren't communicated with well and easily. And for example, where hospitals have used a text message, they've reduced lost outpatient appointments by 50%. So we want to focus on the patient experience, whereby the NHS is not spending its money well.
OK, listen, we're really short on time this morning. That's all we've got time for. Karen Smith, Shadow Minister in the Health Department there. Thanks very much indeed for joining us this morning. Stay tuned. Coming up at 7 o'clock, lots more for you, including the round with the government this morning. You're watching Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel. See you in a moment.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very good morning to you. It is 7 o'clock on the dot. You're tuned in to Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel. It is indeed Tuesday, the 23rd of January. I had to look that up there. Here's what's leading the news this morning. Overnight, the UK and United States have conducted their second joint attacks on Houthi military targets in Yemen, striking an underground storage site, missile storage and surveillance facilities. Mark White will have all the latest.
Well, as with the first set of strikes, 4 RAF Typhoons flew thousands of miles from Cyprus to drop their bombs. It will, of course, fuel concerns about the UK, the US being drawn into a deeper conflict with the Houthi rebels.
Isha out, Jocelyn in. Another day, another major storm is set to sweep across the UK, bringing with it heavy winds, rain and more travel chaos. And Aidan McGiven will have all the weather for you throughout the programme.
Hot on the heels of Storm Isha, today Storm Jocelyn hits the UK with winds strengthening overnight and causing further impact. I'll have the full details in the forecast coming up soon.
Also this morning at 8:20, we'll be speaking to the royal author Robert Hardman about his latest book, The Making of a King, King Charles III and the Modern Monarchy. And Paul Coit will be here with all your sport.
Owen Farrell is off to France. He's going to be playing for Racing 92. Middlesbrough play Chelsea in the second leg of the semi-final of the Carabao Cup tonight. And Novak Djokovic currently playing. This is Taylor Fritz, not Taylor Swift. Please never mix up your Fritzes with your Swifties.
Yeah, definitely not. Thanks very much indeed. Paul, remember you can get involved in all of our discussions this morning. Just send us an email, gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet us @gbnews. So, a developing story leading for us this morning. The UK and the US have carried out their second joint airstrikes against Houthi targets in Yemen. Well, this follows 7 rounds of airstrikes on Houthi military sites by the US in recent days and comes after the UK took part in an initial joint strike operation earlier this month against the Houthis. In a statement late last night, the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps said the latest round of strikes were in self-defence, and he said they would deal another blow to the Iranian-backed militants. Well, joining us now for some analysis on all of this is our security editor, Mark White. Good morning to you. Look, this is the second time in a week. Lots of people will be very concerned then that this is a sign of a broadening and a deepening of that escalation. Yeah, the British government have been at pains to say these strikes are limited and proportionate, but clearly the fact that the UK have felt it necessary to join the US again just 11 days after the first set of strikes on the 11th of January, I think will fuel concerns that we are being dragged into a deeper conflict. Once again, of course, we were forced to fly 4 RAF Typhoon aircraft with the assistance of 2 Voyager tankers, a 3,000-mile, effectively, round trip down to Yemen to target 2 sites, according to the British military, near the main airfield in Sana'a. Multiple targets there that they took out, targets that were responsible for trying to target Western shipping, including UK, US and Israeli-linked shipping as well. Really, since those first strikes took place on the 11th of January, the Houthis have
vowed that they will continue targeting ships, and in fact they've widened that out to include US and UK linked ships as well. And that's brought a number of strikes, of course, from the US. But this, again, really just the second time the UK has felt it necessary to join in once again.
Yeah, and President Biden making that call, asking for our assistance around 8 o'clock last night. I noticed that the leader of the Labour Party and indeed the Speaker of the Commons were not notified, unlike last week for that first airstrike. I mean, presumably we'll get more details. We're speaking to the government in a minute as well about why that might be. But there will be questions about that and exactly why the Americans would want our assistance in this 8th strike as opposed to the last 6, which they seem to have done quite happily on their own.
Yes, I mean, I suppose it depends what was said to Sir Lindsay Hoyle and Sir Keir Starmer at the time that they were called in. It may have been they were told, look, this is what's happening. There may be other occasions when we're called into strike. We're not going to call you in every time. So that might be the sort of modus operandi that they're working on going forward. But clearly there's a concern. As I say, you've got a belligerent and battle-hardened group of rebels that the Saudis thought that they could bomb into submission over a number of years, and that failed. And of course they feel emboldened at the moment because they've been targeting what they say are Israeli-linked ships. That's had a lot of popular support among Arab populations.
OK, Mark White, thanks very much. I'm sure we'll get more from you throughout the course of the morning. But we can speak now to Minister of State for Transport, Hugh Merriman, who's joining us this morning from Westminster. A very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm not sure how much you were able to hear of that conversation I was just having, but I just first of all want to get some thoughts from you this morning on that second strike that the UK is now involved in on Yemen. I'm just curious to know why, after the actions of Saudi having bombed Yemen for a long time now, why we think this is going to make any difference.
Well, of course, what we've seen in the Red Sea is attacks on international shipping, which is dangerous when it comes to lives, also impacts global trade. So protecting our interests and protecting lives, decisions have been made, and we won't hesitate to take further action if that's what's required. That's what we said with the first wave of attacks. We still haven't seen the cessation that we would expect, and so this is a response, and we will always back up our words with actions. And I'm very grateful to all of those who have been involved in this operation, and we stand ready to deliver more. We call on the Houthis and those that back them to step down so we can see international shipping protected. If that doesn't happen, then we and our allies will ensure international shipping is protected.
Yes, and, people will be listening to that, Minister, this morning, probably not reassured by what you're saying. If you don't see a cessation, we will be ready to strike again. I mean, we've heard so much rhetoric in recent weeks, right up from the top, from the Foreign Secretary to previous head of the Armed Forces, Lord General Sir Richard Dannatt, saying that, we're not necessarily in a position to be heading into a kind of escalation that perhaps we could now be facing. How concerned are you that this could very quickly, it's a tinderbox in the area, escalate into something much more serious?
Well, these strikes and the action is limited to the Houthis and to reduce their capability. There were a first wave of strikes which would have done that, but then we've seen responses continuing, and so that's why this action has taken place, and it will be limited, it will be in compliance with international law, it will be proportionate, but it will also have the aim of eradicating these attacks from happening. We cannot stand by and let international shipping come under attack, and we're sort of full square behind that mission with our allies across the world, and that will continue. So we call on the Houthis and those that back them, including the Iranians, to step back and allow international shipping to be safe.
Yeah, and just a word on the parliamentary process. I note that Sir Keir Starmer and Sir Lindsay Hoyle were not briefed ahead of this second strike, unlike the first one last week. Is that likely to be the mechanism going forward, and do you think everybody's going to be happy with that?
Well, of course, when the first set of strikes took place, and before that, the leader of the House of Commons and indeed the leader of the opposition were consulted, and so they would have understood exactly what was intended, and it would have been clear that in the event that further strikes were required, that would occur. But of course, the Prime Minister, at the first available opportunity, came to the House of Commons. He was at the dispatch box for some hours. He'll be in front of the House of Commons again today. So there is that accountability to Parliament and the opportunity for MPs to ask their questions and get information. That will happen again today.
I know you want to talk about the rail, and we will get to that next, but I have to ask you about Rwanda last night, a defeat in the Lords, a blow for the Prime Minister and his latest bill. I note that Baroness Chakrabarti said that peers are entitled to be a little more muscular than usual, and says that sometimes democracy has to be saved from itself. What do you make of those comments?
Well, I mean, that vote would have been advisory because it's regarding international treaty obligations that are a matter for the House of Commons, not the House of Lords. Our intention is clear. The will of the House of Commons was well displayed with that bill. It passed unanimously. It then goes to the House of Lords. They can, of course, make their recommendations, but the government is absolutely clear. We have a plan when it comes to Rwanda. We want these planes to be able to take off. Rwanda is a country that's taken 135,000 asylum seekers, some UN-led. It's a safe place. It will commit to its requirements that this new act will give on them. And we want to get this done because we know the British people want us to deliver a plan. We want to stop the boats and we want to end people smuggling and ultimately save lives. People are losing their lives across the channel. We need a deterrent to stop them losing their lives. And we're determined to press on with this bill, and we would urge the House of Lords to do likewise.
You also want to get people back onto the railways. Tell us about the plans that you want to talk to us about this morning.
We do, and thank you. So we're really delighted today. It's the first day of the Great British Rail sale. So there'll be over 1 million tickets, up to 50% off for those that purchase them, which will allow them to get around the country, see the places they've always wanted to go and see loved ones, go and see the countryside, our great towns and cities. This is the opportunity. So I hope people will get involved and get a great bargain, because I want to be able to grow the railways. And a scheme like this is brilliant. When we did this a couple of years ago, 70,000 people were introduced to the railways as new passengers, and we hope that they're still travelling on rail. So there must be some more people out there that want to use the railways and will be able to do so. So it's a great opportunity for rail, for us to grow rail, and for people to see the best of this great country.
An admission maybe that rail tickets are hugely overpriced and that people simply don't feel that they get the service that they once used to, and they'd rather get in their car.
Well, let me give you a good example of why someone should take up this offer. To go from Bristol to Birmingham would normally cost £30.60. It will cost £15.30 if someone takes advantage of the Great British Rail sale. So this is a great opportunity to get cheaper seats and to make that visit. So we hope they will. In terms of rail, of course, the UK taxpayer has had to support rail to the tune of billions. In the last financial year, £12 billion. That's £420 for every household. So it's important that we balance the burden both on the passenger but also on the taxpayer, because railways deliver so much for this country as a whole. So rather than imposing 9% increases in fares, which would have been the norm, it was 4.9% they'll go up by. So it's a question of sharing that load, and we believe we've got that balance right.
And just lastly, I can't resist, whilst I've got a minister from the Department of Transport on, I have to ask you about the headlines over the weekend about secret plans to get HS2 back on track. I know that this isn't involving the government, these are talks with private companies, but what did you make of that? I mean, where the government has failed, could the private sector pick up the bill?
Well, it's a question for us that our priority was to spread the investment in transport across the entirety of the north rather than just to the northwest. So that's why the Prime Minister formed a plan, Network North, that we would reinvest the £36 billion across other transport projects. It's always for others who may wish to bring forward their own alternative projects. We always welcome private finance, but our plan is clear. We are not delivering HS2 north of the Midlands, and instead we're going to divert that money across the entire region and bring some fantastic transport projects earlier than HS2 would have delivered.
Thank you, Merriman, Minister of State for Transport. Thanks indeed for your time this morning.
Thank you.
An investigation by GB News has found books of stamps bought directly in a post office, a local supermarket, for instance, a corner shop, have been deemed counterfeit. Now, innocent people have been charged 4 times the cost of a standard first-class stamp to get their post by Royal Mail.
And affected recipients are now having to fork out £5 to get their letters after Royal Mail doubled the surcharge from £2.50 on October the 30th.
So what's going on here in the studio? Our gbnews.com digital finance editor. We say good morning to Jessica Sheldon. Hiya, Jessica.
Morning.
You have got the said stamps with you. I'm assuming one is real or one block is real and one block isn't. I can't tell the difference, but this could have King Charles's head on it or Queen Elizabeth II's head on it.
Yeah, we've seen examples of both profiles being affected. We've got some of the stamps here deemed counterfeit, and then we've got some genuine ones here.
Right, could I have a close look then? Let me see. So, wouldn't have a clue. Wouldn't have a clue. Perhaps the real ones are slightly darker in colour, but you wouldn't know that unless you were comparing them side by side. So where is camera 2? There we are there, right. So basically, these are real and these are fraudulent, but we defy you to tell the difference and people can't tell the difference. But here's the real thing. How come you can buy them in post offices?
Well, this is what we've been investigating. We've spoken to a number of people all over the country who have bought stamps at reputable places, such as post office, shops with post offices in them and these small supermarkets. And they're sending these stamps, assuming they are genuine, and it's only when the recipients get a note through the door saying that they are going to have to pay £5 for their item that they are getting them, and they have a small yellow sticker on saying that they're counterfeit.
That you owes £5 and they're counterfeit. How does the post office actually know, or the Royal Mail actually know, that these are counterfeit?
Well, I think you can see the difference when you look very closely.
But is there something that they put through a scanner or something and it doesn't come up?
Yeah, they do have scanners, and you know they've given their statement.
Right. Well, Royal Mail obviously doesn't have a very good reputation and hasn't had for a few years. What do you think about the way they're handling this, which is saying, yeah, you can have your correspondence back again if you pay us £5?
I think it's really unfair because people don't know what is going to arrive in the post. They might think it's something that they've ordered, and so they go and they pay the £5, only to realise it's a Christmas card or something which they would not pay £5 for. And the people who are sending these cards are not meaning to force their loved ones to pay £5 for the card.
Well, this is sort of typical Royal Mail reaction to all of this, isn't it? Which is to penalise anybody that doesn't follow their rules. Shouldn't they be working with customers and saying, look, where did you find this? Let's track this down. Who is printing these? How do they make their way into our post offices and supermarkets?
Yeah, I believe a lot of people who we've spoken to have lodged complaints with Royal Mail and with Post Office, and they just want answers. They want to know how this has happened. So
what would your advice be, Jessica, to anyone who has found themselves in this position? Some people, they buy sheets of stamps in advance, you know, to cover themselves for a few months or the rest of the year or whatever. What would your advice be to someone who believes they have got fraudulent stamps?
Well, if you use a stamp that you think is fraudulent, the person who gets it is going to have to pay £5. So I wouldn't use them. I would go to somewhere you trust, a reputable place, I would say Post Office, and double check that these are legitimate stamps that won't cost people to pay.
And how much is a second-class stamp?
Oh, I only know the first class is £1.25.
First class is £1.25, right, OK. So your advice is go to your post office and ask them to check them out.
Yeah, but be really careful because there are slight differences with the legitimate ones and the fake ones. The texture is different. They're slightly more bumpy when you touch the legitimate ones.
Can I touch? Yeah, so the scanning code Yeah, slightly raised then. Yeah, OK. Well, what a dilemma that is. OK, thank you very much indeed, Jessica Sheldon, GB News digital finance editor on that one. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and you can see that full investigation by scanning the QR code on screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com. But for now, let's take a look at some of the other stories coming into the newsroom this morning.
A breakthrough in detecting Alzheimer's. Scientists have revealed a new blood test which can detect the condition 10 to 15 years before a patient actually shows symptoms.
By 2030, more than 1 million people are expected to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia in Britain, and it's hoped that early detection and this new treatment could help to tackle symptoms.
Farmers are calling on MPs to support tougher regulations to protect them from what they're calling unfair treatment by the big six supermarkets. A dozen scarecrows were placed outside Parliament yesterday as MPs debated reforms to the grocery supply chain. It's after 110,000 people signed a petition urging the government to overhaul the Code of Practice for Grocery Supply.
And Republican voters in the US state of New Hampshire are heading to the polls later today to decide their candidate for November's general election. With Ron DeSantis now out the race, the vote will come down to former President Donald Trump and former ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. The ex-US president currently leads the race, which could set up a rematch with Joe Biden for presidency at the end of the year.
Just an update on the King Charles health situation. He's set to undergo surgery this week, we believe, after he revealed details about an enlarged prostate. Revelations led to thousands of men reaching out to their doctors and online searches on the rise.
Well, Emma Crask is a senior specialist nurse at Prostate Cancer UK, and she joins us now. Good morning to you. Good to see you. Look, there's a good news story in here, isn't there? And so typical of His Majesty to turn a personal crisis into something for the good of the country. And I suppose really great to see more people sitting up and taking notice of this.
Absolutely, it's fantastic, and it's so important that men are curious about their prostates and prostate health so that they can inform themselves further. And it's absolutely fantastic to hear that people are searching out information. And if people do want any information about any prostate problem, actually, they can go to our website, which is prostatecanceruk.org.
Now, it is a delicate part of the body and, you know, it is breakfast time. So without going into too much graphic detail, just explain a little bit about, you know, how serious a procedure this is and how quickly His Majesty can get back to work. Because we know, as the Sun's saying this morning on their front page, he's a bit of a workaholic and the Queen is concerned that he really ought to slow down.
So there are numerous different ways that they can effectively widen the water pipe. And so I can't speculate specifically on what procedure that he will have had done. But the whole idea of these type of procedures is to make life easier for men. And hopefully he'll make these procedures are very routine, and hopefully he will make a speedy recovery. And ultimately, all of these procedures are done to make men's lives more easier, so that they're not having to rush to the loo quickly, feeling like they've emptied their bladder and then having to go back a few minutes later, having to wee more regularly, especially at night. And you can imagine that those kind of symptoms could have quite an impact on how men live their lives. So hopefully he'll make a speedy recovery, and life will be easier for him, as for any man who's had this type of procedure.
And more men than they may reckon will be affected by this, Emma. Is it an inevitable sign of ageing?
It's not necessarily inevitable. As men get older, their prostates do tend to get bigger with more normal prostate cells. So this is a benign condition. But for some men, the enlargement starts to get big enough to press on the water pipe that runs right through the middle of the prostate. So not every man will have problems, but it's almost a normal part of aging for men's prostates to get bigger as they get older.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Emma is a senior specialist nurse in prostate cancer.
Yeah, and we're not entirely sure when His Majesty's having this procedure, but of course it goes without saying we wish him all the very best.
But you see, when people say slow down, slow down to do what? You slow down, you sit and you do nothing, which irritates the heck out of people. But so what are you slowing down for? If you're mentally cognitive and you can do things and you can make decisions, and he can work in his garden or he can, make decisions over the phone or over Zoom or whatever it happens to be.
Well, we've got Robert Hardman coming on in just under an hour, and in his new book he talks about how the king always skips lunch. He's a really hard worker, and I suppose if that's your husband, you say, look, you've had a health scare now, you're not a spring chicken, start taking things a little bit more gently, because otherwise,
Just otherwise what? You see, what my
well, if you don't look after yourself, then...
he is looking after himself, because that's the way he responds as a human being. And I think sometimes some people who work at a much slower pace or like to lie about and laze about and whatever it is, that comes naturally to them. I bet you he's the sort of person it would just make him insufferable to do nothing during the day.
Yeah.
So all that, I always think people say to me, "Oh, slow down. You shouldn't be doing this."
It's true, isn't it? You are insufferable if you're not busy.
But it's true. But a lot of this comes from people who don't do anything.
Yeah,
they don't...
I'd say you're a workaholic, though, as well.
I wouldn't say I'm a workaholic. I'd say I'm just quite interested in what I do and whatever. But usually it's people who don't do anything.
Yeah.
And don't. Yeah. What did you do today? Well, I went down to the shops.
Yeah.
Or I played
sat
golf
at home.
all day.
Yeah.
No, but they're happy with that.
Yeah.
But it's not what makes me tick. It doesn't float my boat personally. But but Camilla's advice to Charles is slow down. If it's dangerous to him, yes, he should. But if it's what keeps him going, what's the harm?
I think Camilla is the one who likes to slow down a little bit, if that's, of the two of them. So that might be why. Anyway, that's our thoughts. We're speaking to Robert Hardman, and actually he's got all the behind the... I wouldn't say gossip, because it's kind of like given the nod by the royal household, but all the details of behind the scenes in his new book, and we're looking forward to that interview in about 55 minutes.
We are not looking forward to Storm Jocelyn, which will definitely be here in 12 hours' time. Aidan McGivern with the weather picture.
Hello, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. This time yesterday, we were reeling from Storm Isha. Today, it's all about Storm Jocelyn, the next storm on the way, bringing spells of rain and then increasingly strong winds overnight tonight. First of all, it's a dry start in the east, doesn't last long. Rain sweeps across the country, heaviest over Western Hills, where there could be some issues for central and southwest Scotland, as well as northwest England, 40 to 60 millimetres of rain falling in some places. Not as much rain towards the southeast, but still dull and damp. It is mild, however, despite the wet and increasingly windy weather, 12 or 13, perhaps even 14 Celsius possible. But the winds really start to ramp up as we end the afternoon and go into the evening. Widely 55 to 65 miles an hour for the northern two-thirds of the country, particularly western coasts and hills. But for the north and west of Scotland, a swathe of 80-mile-per-hour gusts move through overnight. And now, this is more of a normal winter storm compared with Storm Isha, not as powerful, but coming so quickly after Isha could hamper recovery and repair efforts. That's why this one has been named. That's why there is an amber warning for the north and west of Scotland. It stays blustery into tomorrow morning. A bright start in the south, further showers to come for Northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland. The most frequent showers will be across the north and west of Scotland with a continued strong wind, but the winds will be coming down through the day, and with some brightness in the south, feeling a little more pleasant. Highs here of 11 to 12 Celsius, a bit cooler further north.
Still to come, the NHS has issued a type of weight loss pill designed to make people feel fuller so they eat less. You're saying it's like a stone, but inflates to the size of a...
Well, I hope it's not like a stone, but it's about the size of a stone. Depends what size of stone that you collect. But
help you lose a stone.
It's about that size. They put it into your mouth, down your throat, down your windpipe, and then it's connected to a tube, and they inflate it. So therefore, it fills up your tummy, and it makes you think you're fuller than you actually are. So this is a new thing on the NHS. Would you get it? Should we be looking at different ways to reduce weight? We'll be debating that one next as you sit down to your bacon and eggs this morning.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Just getting reaction from the Royal Mail as to that last story that we did, which was about fraudulent postage stamps, and really quite frightening that you can buy them at Royal Mail outlets or post office outlets and supermarkets and all sorts of things like that. So anyway, there's a very long gobbledygook statement here from the Royal Mail. I'm trying to make sense of it, Isabel. They say, it is vital we can investigate any instance where a person believes their stamps have been incorrectly identified as counterfeit or pre-used.
Yeah, essentially they're saying, unfortunately, without seeing all of the envelopes used, it'd be impossible to explain what happened in these cases, but we will always happily review individual cases, and if an error has been made, we will, of course, correct it. So there we go. I mean, it's just, you know, in the meantime, you've got to pay double to get your misdirected post back, and, you know, a fight on your hands. We know how that usually plays out.
But imagine paying £5 for a Christmas card that you don't want. But I suppose you'd want to know, it's like, someone sent me a present at Christmas. Well, they say they sent me a present. and it didn't arrive.
No, it did arrive.
And
you signed for it.
I didn't sign for it.
Yeah, I sent Eamonn a hamper for Christmas, an Irish hamper, and it's disappeared. So someone in your household has snaffled it.
Well, excuse me, the signature was H. Holmes,
Are there any H Holmes?
H-O-O-L-M-E-S, right? So somebody's made up the signature, right? It's quite obvious. Nobody in the blooming house. They all know their name. They can all write their name. The thing is, it didn't arrive.
You sure, like, your son didn't nick it or something? By the way, Niall, you know I'm your biggest fan, so that is a deeply offensive allegation.
Jack, they are.
No,
you
I take
are.
that back.
Yeah,
But-
thieves.
No, but I've got the notification.
Felons.
It's been
Is that
delivered.
what a thief is? A felon?
Possibly, yeah.
Yes,
if it was
a felon.
America.
No,
Felony.
No. There's loads of drinking clubs in Belfast called the Felons.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a lot of felons there. The education I could give you.
Oh, gosh.
So in Robin Hood's day, there were felons.
Were there?
Yes. I think a felon
Don't get
is
me
a
started.
thief.
When you talk about Robin Hood, I totally just go to Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, which takes me to Kevin Costner, which brings me back to my favourite TV show of all time. Yeah.
Robin Hood, riding through the glen.
Robin Hood, with his band of men, feels for the bad, loved by the good. Robin Hood. I don't want to be involved in this. Robin Hood. By the way...
So who was Robin Hood?
His name was Richard Green.
Correct. 2 points.
And by the way, there's been notification of that delivery, and because we know it's yours, because it's signed Best Wishes from Eamonn Holmes. That's how we know that you suffer. That's how we know so.
Sometimes you just wonder, did people really send you anything? Did they send you anything? Did they just say it got lost in the...
I sent you the notification. You saw it on my phone.
Isabel did tell me she forgot to send it.
I didn't.
That's what I'd heard.
Unbelievable.
What did you get me that I'm missing?
I got an Irish hamper of nostalgic Irish treats. Well, I don't know what Irish nostalgia is, but it's what it said on the website. It's nostalgic Irish
There'd be
stuff.
whiskey involved.
Yeah.
There'd be stout, there'd be Baileys involved in it. There'd be...
You tell me.
Anyway.
You ate it or drank it, and I don't know where it's gone.
Right, we're now going to discuss a weight loss pill designed to make you feel fuller. The idea is, so if you feel full, you eat less.
So it's called a gastric balloon. It's sort of the size of a stone. We presume a swallowable-sized stone, and then it gets inflated in your stomach, and it takes just 15 minutes.
Goodness me. So it's been approved by the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, and it's designed to make you feel fuller. We've said all that anyway. So we'll be discussing if it's time to ditch unnatural ways to lose weight, like fat loss surgeries. Political consultant Emma Burnell, who herself has had a fat loss surgery, she says, no, you can't ban these sort of things. And Steve Miller, I think you've had something as well, Steve, didn't you, at one stage in your life?
Well, all I do is, if I put weight on, I eat cake naked in front of a mirror, and it suddenly, the weight just drops.
Right, your appetite is reduced. Now, Emma, do you mind telling us what you had and why you're in favour of this procedure?
So I had gastric sleeve surgery almost exactly 10 years ago, and I've lost almost exactly half my body weight as a result. I lost that in the first few years, and I've kept it off. I am, as your viewers will, I'm sure, attest, by no means yet thin, but what I'm not is morbidly obese. And what that surgery gave me was the head start I needed to get into good results and to keep the weight off and to completely change my lifestyle.
And the device or whatever you had implanted or whatever is still there?
No, with gastric sleeve surgery, that's not, they don't put anything in you, they take some of your stomach away, so that in the same way that this makes you fuller, you just get full very quickly. Now, the stomach is a muscle, it does go back working like a normal stomach. But what I couldn't do is the amounts that I was before I had surgery. Very, very, very unwell.
Yeah. Well, Steve, why would you object to anything that helps people lose weight? Because we know, morbid obesity is hugely dangerous, speaks for itself. But also, we know that quite often, people who overeat, it's a mental thing. It's not necessarily something they can just give up. There's either an addiction or there's an emotional connection. And it's, all very well for thin people, dare I say, to sit there and say, oh, for goodness sake, get a grip. But there's more to it. If this helps, why not?
Oh, I think you raise a very good point in terms of the mental issue, and the mental issue includes many things. One of the mental issues is that we've become very, well, lazy and lardy in the UK, to be quite frank, because we can't be bothered. However, there are people, you're right, that do have an addiction to food. There's not as many as we think. There are people with emotional eating issues, and I accept that. But do you honestly think swallowing something, such as what's been described, will deal with the underlying issues of why you've got these mental issues?
It might not deal with the underlying issues, but it might stop you being made dangerously overweight.
For a certain period of time, it might. Yes, you're absolutely right. But I think if people looked at other things, such as therapeutic intervention, as opposed to throwing in a tablet or sticking a needle in themselves, this new weight loss jab, then they would do much better. So actually, no, I think we have to be very careful what we certainly swallow, and also in terms of this particular intervention. But also, I think in the UK, frankly, it's not going to go down well with a lot of people, what I'm going to say, but we've got to get the R factor back. Responsibility, personal responsibility. We've got to be more like Japan. In Japan, they on the street, they actually say, hey, if you're too fat, sort it out. In this country, we sort of squeal and say, oh, that's terrible. That's fat shaming. No, it's actually life-saving, actually, because the truth, yes, it does hurt, but often you've got to give people a dose of the truth. Why has Japan got 4% obesity rate and the United Kingdom has got 25% obesity rate? I'll tell you why. Because we've got soft on fat. We actually love celebrating our curves in this country, otherwise known as celebrating your fat. And I'm sure Emma wants to throw her cornflakes right over me for saying that.
Emma?
Well, I won't be eating cornflakes. I'm off to Slimming World in a moment.
Sounds gone.
I honestly, when I was that overweight, people would frequently tell me how fat I was. Random strangers in the street. The idea that that doesn't happen, and the idea that it's in any way helpful to your emotional or mental position that gets you into the state that you get into that in the first place, is so barking mad that I just can't believe anyone's really still saying that so far on into this debate. Look, yes, ultimately, we know that the way to lose weight is to have that sense of progress and discipline in yourself. If you eat fewer calories, do more exercise. But for some people, but those with addictions, you have these types of surgeries are an incredible head start that help you get to that point. Now, we absolutely do need to have much more therapeutic interventions. It's got to start here as well as in your body. But that doesn't mean that these two things are in contest with each other. They have to be in support.
Folks, we've got to leave it there. Thank you both very, very much indeed. And, you know, good luck in your fight. Continued always the fight against the weight. Thank you very much indeed.
And let us know your views at home as well. Do you think shame is the answer, or do you think it's a good thing that there's all these different alternatives now? Ozempic, that's the so-called fat jab, this balloon, or indeed all the sort of gastric sleeve or gastric band surgeries that are out there. Let us know what you think.
What Paul Coyte thinks now of sports-wise. Just thinking of other famous Robin Hoods. Errol Flynn.
Yes.
There was some boyo on an ITV series in the 70s.
Yes.
Wasn't there Sean Connery's son played Robin Hood?
He did, yeah, I think he did, yeah. And also in the 90s, because Isabel mentioned Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, the theme was Bryan Adams, wasn't it? Everything I Do for You, which was #1 forever. And there were stories, and this was true, is that there was a couple that got married and they went in and said, you know, when we get married, we'd like that song from Robin Hood. So as they walked through Romantic, it went, Robin Hood, Robin Hood, riding through the glen. It's like, no, not that one, which I think is quite lovely.
Kevin Costner's the best one for me.
You think so? Yeah, Kevin?
Well, it's obviously feeding my Yellowstone obsession at the moment.
Oh, you're still
deeply engrossed.
Okay,
season
fine.
2 now. Right, sport.
Owen Farrell. Owen Farrell is off to France. Talk about him going off to France. He's leaving England because, as we mentioned earlier, unnecessary stick that he's taken as England captain. He's an England legend, there's no doubt about that. During the World Cup, and he's stepped away from England in the Six Nations, which starts in a week or so. Just thinking about mental health and his family, so he's decided to go over and play in France. Now, a few reasons for that. Obviously, he can get away. Racing 92. Big money. He's going to be playing in Paris. He's been at Saracens since he was 17. £1 million a year contract, but it means he cannot play for England because them is the rules.
Why is club rugby so much more lucrative in France than in the UK?
It's just more popular. It just seems to be more popular, and that's where the big money is, especially at Racing 92. You know, there's some great Talisi's playing over there. He's playing with great players. It's just unfortunate when you see players like Jack Willis and Jack Noel, Sam Simmons as well, that have decided that they're going to go over. You can't blame them. And someone like Owen Farrell, when there's talk that, oh, you know what, he may come back again after 2 years, he's done now. There's no question. He's done. He'll be 35 by the time he comes back, so he's going to go over and play in France, and that'll be the end of it.
The Carabao Cup, first big domestic cup off the season will be soon. Semi-final stage there, and it's Middlesbrough Chelsea tonight. Paul, got to leave it there. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Still to come, a wildlife park on alert over a swearing.
Love this story.
That's ridiculous, that is. Right, we'll talk about that next.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You stand on postal deliveries on a Saturday, right?
I like seeing my postman. He sees me in my dressing gown on a Saturday morning. I always feel bad for him.
You're lucky you see your postman.
Yeah.
That's when they turn up to deliver your post.
So what's the point, Claire, then, of a Saturday post? What is the point of a Saturday post?
Well, you know, the Royal Mail is getting such stick at the moment because of the Horizon scandal, etc., and the wonderful TV dramatisation. Front page of the Times today is leading with Sunak's quote, "I won't countenance ditching Saturday post." Now, for those of us that actually get post 6 days a week, bravo, there's a lot of us that don't. Now, you had a segment earlier with your
What difference does it make whether you get your post on a Saturday or a Monday or a Friday?
Because it does. It matters that you get it. You think about publications, weekly publications for subscribers that come out. They post them, the copy's done on Wednesday, Thursday they're out, they're posted by Thursday, so the membership quota can get them and read them over the weekend.
Yeah, and if you send a first-class stamp on a Friday for someone's birthday on a Saturday...
Yes, exactly.
Then it arrives on the Monday.
But
there used to be 7 billion deliveries on a Saturday, and now there's 2.
Yeah, go figure.
So you're saying ditch them?
No, people aren't
I'm
sending...
Eamonn. Because your brother's a postie.
Yeah.
What do you think?
He'd say ditch them.
Would he?
Would he?
Yeah.
OK, fine then.
Look, who wants to work on a Saturday?
Yeah.
I do think I wouldn't miss post on a Saturday.
No, I agree
it's never good news, is it?
It's not an urgent.
It's a birthday card.
The thing
That's
I
what
would
I like,
say
first
is
of all.
how will this affect the employees, the posties?
Yeah.
You know, is it going to come at the cost of their jobs and pay? Because I love my postman. I'd hate to see him out of a job. That would be my only worry about it, but I can live without post on a Saturday.
But there's so many people that aren't sending letters now because stamps are expensive. First class, £1.25.
And texting
Second class,
is cheaper and
75
quicker.
pence. But there's something really lovely about a thank you card being delivered or a note being delivered instead of... I mean, all bills now are online,
When did
mostly.
you last get a handwritten letter in the post? Anybody?
I got one for my birthday, but that's not because it was my birthday. It was also a thank you card because of New Year.
I got one
And it meant a lot.
I got one from the present Queen a while back, just about a year and a half ago, and that was lovely to get.
Oh, very nice. What was she saying?
None of your business.
Tell us more.
None of your business.
Did she say absolutely, Eamonn, you're wonderful?
She did say, Eamonn, you're wonderful. Didn't say absolutely, but... Yeah.
Wow, interesting. The plot thickens. OK, Lewis, let's talk about childcare. This was the big announcement from the Chancellor in, what was it now, the budget last year, or was it the autumn statement? And it seems that there's a bit of a disaster and the rollout's having to be delayed.
Yeah, I remember watching this live and being like, oh, good, there is something good in there for me with 2 small kids. And obviously yesterday we had this news that, oh, it's all in tatters, it's all delayed. Rishi Sunak has come out and said, no, don't worry, guys, it's all sorted, it'll all be fine. But the problem is, although he thinks that it'll all be fine by April, when I think the rollout is, people are trying to plan now. So people might be saying, look, my child can go and have 15 3-hours in April, so actually I can accept this job. And if now you're being told, well, actually, the nursery hasn't got the codes or whatever it is that they need, now you're kind of a bit worried that, well, can I go back to work?
What are the practical issues? Are we talking about a technical glitch here? Or are we actually saying, you know what, there aren't enough childcare providers? And
Look,
that we
none
know...
of that matters. Rishi's got an election coming up. He's going to get this out the door because that's a big...
Yeah, but how are you going to find these people? I mean, highly skilled,
But what are
poorly
the changes?
paid.
Very poorly paid, and nurseries don't make profit. You know, you think the cost is exorbitant, but it's
Nurseries don't make profit.
No,
nurseries.
What planet do you live on?
No, nurseries are definitely struggling more than ever. Remember we spoke to my nursery
Well, right,
lady after.
OK.
They
Right.
charge a
I'm
lot of
telling
money.
you, all the richest people in Northern Ireland own nurseries.
Yeah, but maybe historically.
Maybe, but not here.
I think the changes were ratios for certain ages so that these people who are poorly paid and oversubscribed will have more children to look after. But, you know, this isn't good if one of their sort of headline
here's an answer.
policies
Here's
gets
an answer.
delayed.
Here's an answer
Oh,
to make your blood boil. Don't have children.
No.
Eamonn homes.
We've got an ageing population.
Why is it anybody's right to have a child?
Well, let's just go through.
This
Let's just
woman's
hang on a
right.
minute. We have a huge problem in this country with a top-heavy society. Loads of old people, not enough people having babies, which means that those who are of working age are having to pay huge amounts of money to subsidise social care, and that is only getting a bigger proportion of their income as the population reduces in terms of the number
It's
of children.
not going to get any
People need to
better.
have babies.
We do.
We now need two parents to go to work in order to afford their housing.
Is that what you thought
and so you basically...
When you were creating your babies, was that your thought with your husband? We've got to help the socio-economic situation of the country.
Well, of course not.
Do one for
I'm
the
sure
country
you didn't.
here.
No, of course.
No, of course she didn't.
Yeah, but that's
No,
not
but-
the point, Eamonn.
I do think that the cost is astronomical. So I've got two little ones. If there were no free hours, it would cost nearly $3,000 a month to put them both in nursery.
Yeah.
That's insane in a country where I think the average wage is like 35 grand a year.
It's
just
way
not
more
doable.
expensive than any other developed nation.
And it's harder. So, you know, problems facing parents is like, OK, do we have one, get them into school and then have another one? And then you're sort of looking at sort of 10 years where you've had this young child that's needed childcare. So what we did was have them close together. They can grow up together, it's nicer, but the cost is ridiculous. And
Do you know
I would
what?
say I'm someone that's well paid. So if I can't afford it, how can anyone else? And then if only people that can afford it are having children, then we're going to have a
No, I think
lot
the
fewer
government's got
children.
things back to front. I think they should be underpinning family values and actually paying people to stay at home and looking after their own children. Why don't we adopt the Hungarian model whereby the women who have the children don't pay tax? And they're actually...
Why don't we talk about swearing parrots? A wildlife park is on high alert after introducing 8 foul-mouthed game birds to their new flock.
Yeah, they're African greys, and there's over 100, as you've just said, in Lincolnshire, and they've got potty mouths, potty parrot mouths. I think we should
Terrible.
have one on this desk, actually.
Absolutely disgraceful. Thank you both very much indeed. Claire Lewis back in 45 minutes.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, it's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. This time yesterday, we were reeling from Storm Isha. Today, it's all about Storm Jocelyn, the next storm on the way, bringing spells of rain and then increasingly strong winds overnight tonight. First of all, it's a dry start in the east, doesn't last long. Rain sweeps across the country, heaviest over Western Hills, where there could be some issues for central and southwest Scotland, as well as northwest England, 40 to 60 millimetres of rain falling in some places. Not as much rain towards the southeast, but still dull and damp. It is mild, however, despite the wet and increasingly windy weather, 12 or 13, perhaps even 14 Celsius possible. But the winds really start to ramp up as we end the afternoon and go into the evening. Widely 55 to 65 miles an hour for the northern two-thirds of the country, particularly western coasts and hills. But for the north and west of Scotland, a swathe of 80-mile-per-hour gusts move through overnight. And now, this is more of a normal winter storm compared with Storm Isha, not as powerful, but coming so quickly after Isha could hamper recovery and repair efforts. That's why this one has been named. That's why there is an amber warning for the north and west of Scotland. It stays blustery into tomorrow morning. A bright start in the south, further showers to come for northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland. The most frequent showers will be across the north and west of Scotland with a continued strong wind, but the winds will be coming down through the day. And with some brightness in the south, feeling a little more pleasant. Highs here of 11 to 12 Celsius, a bit cooler further north.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Eight o'clock on the dot. A very good morning to you. Tuesday, 23rd of January. You're having breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
And here's what's leading the news this morning. Overnight, the UK and the United States have conducted their second joint attacks on Houthi military targets in Yemen, striking an underground storage site, a missile storage and surveillance facilities. The Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, spoken in the last hour on the government's decision to conduct strikes.
What the Houthis are doing is unacceptable, it's illegal, and it's threatening the freedom of navigation. That's why we've taken the action.
We'll have analysis here in the studio from Mark White.
Well, 4 RAF Typhoons flew almost 3,000 miles from Cyprus to conduct strikes on multiple Houthi targets in the capital, Sana'a.
In other news, Isha out, Jocelyn in. Another day, another major storm is set to sweep across the UK, bringing with it heavy winds, rain and more travel chaos.
And let's have a look at that weather in more detail with Aidan.
Hot on the heels of Storm Isha. Today, Storm Jocelyn hits the UK with winds strengthening overnight and causing further impacts. I'll have the full details in the forecast coming up soon.
Also coming up soon, 8:20, we'll be speaking to the royal author Robert Hardman about his latest book, The Making of a King, King Charles III and the Modern Monarchy.
Paul Coyte with the sport.
Owen Farrell is off to France. It's on a holiday thing. He's going to be playing for Racing 92 in Paris. Middlesbrough go to Stamford Bridge, 1-0 up against Chelsea in the second leg of that semi-final of the Carabao Cup. And Taylor Fritz currently losing to Novak Djokovic. This is Taylor Fritz, not the current chart-topping singer Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift.
Yes, Swift and Fritz.
Easy mistake and never seen together in the same room.
Correct, yeah. Never seen them play tennis together or sing together either.
You were saying, I was talking about Rory McIlroy and his Dubai Open jug.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
see the the jug, the claret jug you get for the British Open.
Yeah.
The Open, which is about that.
That's right, yeah.
But the one Rory had...
The biggest trophy, so you know what, I'm even going to look and see if I can find some of the biggest trophies in sport.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you think it's anything bigger than that?
I think there's a good chance it will, but Rory is only about this tall, so it actually looks like it's actually bigger than he really is.
OK, my friend, thank you very much indeed.
We've also been talking about Alzheimer's this morning on the front of lots of the papers, this blood test breakthrough, and you've been very good sending in your thoughts about it. Richie saying, I thought it'd be a good idea to roll it out for over 50s. I'd want to know, and then I could do something about it. John in Derby says, unless there's a cure for Alzheimer's, why would you want to know you're going to have it in 15 years' time? And Bob goes further, saying, sounds positive, but what if the test confirms possibility of the disease and then affects your health and life insurances for many years?
And
also,
your car insurance.
What about your driving licence?
Absolutely, all of these things as well. So there we go. You can join in any of our discussions throughout the programme this morning. GBviews at gbnews.com. OK, leading the news this hour, Britain and America have carried out their second joint airstrikes against Houthi targets. This is in Yemen, and it follows 7 rounds of airstrikes on military sites by America in recent days. It comes after Britain took part in an initial joint strike operation earlier this month.
Well, in a statement, the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, said the latest round of strikes were in self-defence and would deal another blow to the Iranian-backed militants.
Meanwhile, the Foreign Minister, David Cameron, said the UK will continue to degrade Houthis and their ability to carry out any further attacks. This is what he had to say.
Let's be absolutely clear. We have no quarrel with the Yemeni people. Indeed, our aid feeds over 100,000 Yemenis every month, using the sea lane, delivering that aid, which is precisely the sea lane that the Houthis are trying to close. Since we last took action, 10 days ago, there have been over 12 attacks on shipping by the Houthis in the Red Sea. These attacks are illegal, they're unacceptable. And what we've done, again, is send the clearest possible message that we will continue to degrade their ability to carry out these attacks, whilst sending the clearest possible message that we back our words and our warnings with action.
Possible message, but is it making any difference? Well, earlier we spoke to the Shadow Health Minister, Karen Smith, about the situation and whether the opposition were informed of the strike.
We don't know why the government haven't spoken to us on the usual terms. We would expect them to do that, and we would certainly expect a statement by the Prime Minister today in Parliament, so we will await developments on that today.
In the studio now, our security editor, Mark White, with his take on all of this. You know, we'll talk about the military and the political ramifications, but the sheer physical ability to do this, Mark, amazes me. The guy that the British pilots would have flown 3,000 miles. Now, that's what transatlantic, basically, and then enter into air combat after that. I think it's incredible.
Yes, that's right. And of course, fly all the way back to RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus. That's not the ideal way of doing it. We do it, and we've done it in the likes of Syria and Iraq before in conflicts. The ideal way would be the way the Americans are doing, is to have a carrier strike group in that area. But for whatever reason, HMS Queen Elizabeth is not being sent. It's going on an exercise, we know, in a month or two's time, but it's not at the moment being sent to the Red Sea.
So tell us why GB News viewers and listeners this morning should care about this. Why is this important to all of us?
I think what Lord Cameron said towards the end of his answer there should ring alarm bells in the population right across the country. And that is, you know, the fact that the Houthis have not responded to the previous strikes. They carried out 12 attacks on shipping. And Lord Cameron saying that we will continue to degrade the Houthis as long as they persist. That raises the spectre that we're going to get sucked into a much deeper conflict again in the Middle East. And we only need to think back to what happened in Afghanistan and Iraq, to the huge cost, you know, in terms of monetary, but also, you know, the service personnel who died in those conflicts as well. And then you've got the continued targeting of shipping in this very busy shipping lane that, OK, it's a long way away, but these ships, many of them are headed to the UK. When they're being targeted, they reroute. That costs much more to ship them. The insurance for these ships escalates as well. It all then affects us potentially in the price we pay for commodities in this country.
Yeah, and the widening and the deepening of this in itself a worry. But meanwhile, I suppose you could argue the sort of source of all of this trouble, Israel-Gaza, that's hotting up as well, with a significant loss of life on the Israeli side this morning.
Yeah, the Houthis say that the reason they're targeting ships in the first place are Israeli-linked ships as a show of solidarity for the Palestinians. Well, the Palestinian Health Ministry say that they are linked to Hamas, we should say that 190 Palestinians were killed in Gaza yesterday. The Israelis have just revealed overnight the single biggest loss of life of Israeli military personnel in Gaza. 21 of their soldiers killed in a single incident. They were laying mines around a couple of buildings linked to Hamas that they were intending to blow up. A rocket-propelled grenade was fired at one of the tanks that was guarding the military. That somehow triggered the explosion prematurely and brought these buildings down on top of those Israeli military soldiers. So, yeah, it's still raging in Gaza.
These are major strikes. Does this put an end to the threat the Houthis represent?
I don't think so at all, no. I mean, as I said, Lord Cameron was saying, you know, after the first quite significant strikes targeting multiple targets controlled by the Houthis. They thought they were sending the Houthis a very clear message, giving them a bloody nose, getting them to back off. But this is, you know, a belligerent group. The Saudi military tried to bomb them into submission over several years and failed. They feel emboldened at the moment because of what they're doing, they say, in support of the Palestinians. It's getting widespread support among Arab populations. So I think they will probably continue doing what they're doing. And in doing that, I think it's clear we're going to get sucked into sending more in the way of tornado, typhoon jets and potentially more military assets into that region.
Mark, appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Joining us now for the political reaction, our correspondent Olivia Utley there this morning. What way is this playing out, Olivia?
Well, it's a bit of a bizarre situation, actually. There is disagreement over whether Keir Starmer and the leader of the opposition were told in advance about these strikes. When the first strikes happened a few weeks ago, Rishi Sunak made the decision not to recall Parliament. It was a Friday evening. He decided that instead a debate would be had retrospectively. But he did tell Lindsay Hoyle and Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer said at the time that he supported the Prime Minister, although there were plenty of his MPs, particularly on the left of the party, who disagreed and thought that a debate should have been had in Parliament before the strikes took place. This time around, the government is claiming, Hugh Merriman, the Transport Secretary, has been on the television this morning, saying that Starmer and Hoyle were told this time round as well. But strangely, Starmer and Hoyle are both denying that they were told this time around. And as we saw from Karen Smith there, the Shadow Health Minister, she too is saying that Labour weren't warned in advance about this. Now, it'll be fascinating to see how this plays out over the course of the day, because Keir Starmer was very supportive of the Prime Minister last time, even though that flew in the face of what his own backbench MPs wanted. If it turns out that Rishi Sunak hadn't told Keir Starmer in advance, it feels as though he might have sort of riled the leader of the opposition sort of unnecessarily, and it'll be so interesting to see how Starmer will respond to that.
Olivia, I have to ask you as well about the defeat in the Lords last night on the Rwanda bill. Interesting choice words from Baroness Chakrabarti saying peers are entitled to be a little more muscular than usual and that sometimes democracy has to be saved from itself.
Well, really, really interesting remarks, and bodes very badly, I think, for Rishi Sunak. We did say in advance that the problem with the way that the bill passed in the House of Commons, with all of those Tory rebels making so much noise, even though in the end they rode in behind the Prime Minister, the fact that there was so much disagreement about it has seemingly emboldened the Lords to be, as Chakrabarti puts it, a bit more muscular than they might normally be. They voted not to ratify the treaty. It'll be really interesting to see how this plays out as well, because technically the government does have the power to overrule what the Lords say, but that power is usually reserved for measures that were specifically in the manifesto, the governing party's manifesto. And the Rwanda policy actually wasn't in the government's 2019 manifesto. So I think we're set for quite a few more months, probably, of parliamentary ping-pong, as they call it, when the Lords will make some changes to the bill, send it back to the Commons, Commons won't like it, send it back to the Lords. And all in all, it looks as though Rishi Sunak's plan to get planes off the ground to Rwanda by the spring is looking less and less likely by the day.
Thanks very much indeed.
The 10th named storm this winter. This one's Jocelyn. It hits tonight. It's on its way to the country. Heavy rains and strong winds are expected. The Met Office has issued a danger to life alert as the whole storm brews. Let's go to our Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie and GB News reporter Jack Carson. Dougie, still dark where you are, of course, and the thing that gets me, Dougie, we've got this public sector workers' strike as well. We've got a whole problem of clearing debris off the roads. We've got... you tell us what the problems are with another storm knocking on the door.
Yes, well, hello and welcome to Carryduff. This is the main road between Carryduff, Saintfield, Crossgar, down Patrick, and brings in a very large amount of traffic into Belfast every morning. But the remnants of the storm that was here before, I'll just move out of the way and show you. This huge tree is straight across the road here in Northern Ireland. It is causing, well, you can see no traffic can get through here at all. But the real problem with this is, Eamonn, that the tree itself has been brought down across electricity lines. It is still very dark, and I don't know if the cameraman can just pick that up there. You can see up in the corner there, the electric lines have been caught in this tree, and they have came down and they're through the tree. So what happens now is the electricity board will not cut these trees up because they can't. That's a specialist job, and it is the job of the Forestry Commission to do that. And of course they are on strike, so the main road remains blocked. Lots of money being lost going into Belfast because of course those workers cannot get to work, and the roads that they're being put around are B roads. I mean, there is quite a sizable diversion, and that's not just here in Carryduff. That is right around Northern Ireland. There is some cars still caught under trees, etc., on the Ballygowan Road going into Belfast. So while that goes on, the electricity workers cannot get power back to those people. You can imagine this line is coming from this side of Carryduff straight across into the rural areas before it heads on down towards Monterey. So there's loads of people still without power, and Jocelyn is on its way in tonight. The rain has really started here quite heavily actually, and it is going to cause more problems.
Dougie's painting you a picture there of commuter belt area of a part of Belfast there, how people live just on the outskirts of Belfast and make their way into the city. We now move to
Jack Carson, who's in Porthcawl for us. Good morning to you, Jack.
Yeah, good morning. Here on the coast at Porthcawl, the wind is really whipping up here. I mean, I was here a few weeks ago also covering the bad weather we were having then, but the wind already today certainly much quicker than it was at any point where I was here just a few weeks ago. Now, the yellow weather warning for wind in this part of South Wales doesn't even come into effect from the Met Office until 12 o'clock today. It runs until Wednesday afternoon, but the wind already whipping up a little bit of a mini storm here on the coastline. The rain isn't too bad so far here this morning, but that wind really whipping up the spray from the sea. We know around parts of Wales, particularly yesterday between Swansea and Shrewsbury, Transport for Wales had to put on replacement bus services because of problems on the lines there, and there are still major delays expected around Llandudno as well this morning. So again, for the people that are looking to travel on those railway networks to commute to work and go about their business, of course it is advised advised to check before you travel, because, as Doogie was mentioning, as you saw with Doogie there in Northern Ireland with the tree across the road, it is those kind of disruptions, whether it's in some parts of England. Yesterday we saw greenhouses on parts of the railway lines, fallen trees as well. Fallen trees have been all over here in Wales, particularly on those more rural roads, on those B roads, but the railway network's working overnight to try and get many of their services and delays out of the system. Now, Storm Jocelyn is the 10th named storm of this season. We only need 2 more storms between now and August for it to be one of the busiest storm seasons. So, yeah, that impact of Storm Jocelyn set to hit the UK today.
Cheers, Jack. Thank you very much indeed. And Dougie, when we come back to you again, fallen trees are going to feature very prominently in what you're talking about. Just give people an indication of these special trees we're talking about.
Well, these are the dark hedges. They were brought to fame by many films, and including the Game of Thrones. They are 250 years old, and 3 of them came down in the storm yesterday, rather sadly. And these trees, anybody that sees them will know them that have watched the Game of Thrones and many feature films. They come beautifully across the road. They were planted there for basically to hold up the road. The roots of these trees grow onto the roads, and they keep the road from sinking down in. But they were for a big stately home back 250 years ago, and unfortunately some of them are now down.
And hopefully a bit more light to see all of that, Dougie, later on. Jack, Dougie, thank you both very much indeed.
Let's get all the details now. Aidan McGivern with your forecast. Good morning, Aidan.
Hello, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. This time yesterday, we were reeling from Storm Isha. Today, it's all about Storm Jocelyn, the next storm on the way, bringing spells of rain and then increasingly strong winds overnight tonight. First of all, it's a dry start in the east, doesn't last long. Rain sweeps across the country, heaviest over Western Hills, where there could be some issues for central and southwest Scotland, as well as northwest England, 40 to 60 millimetres of rain falling in some places. Not as much rain towards the southeast, but still dull and damp. It is mild, however, despite the wet and increasingly windy weather, 12 or 13, perhaps even 14 Celsius possible. But the winds really start to ramp up as we end the afternoon and go into the evening. Widely 55 to 65 miles an hour for the northern 2/3 of the country, particularly western coasts and hills. But for the north and west of Scotland, a swathe of 80-mile-per-hour gusts move through overnight. And now, this is more of a normal winter storm compared with Storm Isha, not as powerful, but coming so quickly after Isha could hamper recovery and repair efforts. That's why this one has been named. That's why there is an amber warning for the north and west of Scotland. It stays blustery into tomorrow morning. A bright start in the south, further showers to come for Northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland. The most frequent showers will be across the north and west of Scotland with a continued strong wind, but the winds will be coming down through the day, and with some brightness in the south, feeling a little more pleasant. Highs here of 11 to 12 Celsius, a bit cooler further north.
Right, it is grim outside. Here's some
Just go
advice.
home and close
Run,
the door.
pop the kettle on, don't go anywhere. You've just got time to make yourself a cup of tea or coffee, and in just a moment we will be speaking to the man of the moment, the royal author Robert Hardman, about his latest book and all those royal revelations you've been hearing about here on GB News for the last week or so. See you in a minute.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Now, we are delighted to have in the studio acclaimed royal biographer Robert Hardman. Robert has released his latest book, which is New King, New Court, Charles III, The Inside Story. And he's here to give us the insight on that because there's been a lot of royal stories.
There really have. I mean, if you've opened a paper for the last 10 days or so, pretty much every royal story has stemmed from your book, Robert. Good morning. Thanks for coming in.
It's a pleasure.
Congratulations on informing us on new things, and we thought perhaps there wasn't anything more to know.
Well, it's been an extraordinary year and a bit, really, since, of course, the passing of the longest-lived, longest-reigning, many would say greatest monarch of all times, Elizabeth II. And, you know, a hell of a pair of shoes to step into and a lot of challenges for the king. But I've been following him and being in and around the royal orbit since
you
succession.
talk about shoes to step into. What about Queen Camilla and the Princess of Wales, the then Princess of Wales, Diana, stepping into her shoes? Because Camilla, let's not forget, was completely vilified. And am I alone in thinking that Charles and Camilla are very independent, very dependent on each other, and they complement each other very, very well?
They're a great double act. Queen Camilla is sort of central to the way that this reign has got off to a great start. I mean, it really has been, you know, it's solid, and when you look at the political instability around us, you need sort of one institution that's sort of, as it were, you know, just entirely dependable. And Queen Camilla is part of that. She brings a sort of breath of fresh air. She doesn't stand on ceremony too much. It's quite interesting. He loves getting stuck into crowds. You know, whenever they're on the road, I went on a state visit to Germany, been around the country, he often carries on talking to people way over time. You see everybody looking at their watches, and everyone's a bit nervous about going up and saying to the king, "Look, sir, can you get a move on?" But she's the one who can do it. So they say, "Ma'am, can you have a word?" and she has this knack of digging him in the back with the corner of her handbag.
Yes.
It's very gently, but it's a sort of sign, and he goes, "OK, time to go."
In this era where we're living in the sort of period of the Crown, where fact and fiction are blurred into one, this is all the more important, what you've written here. And lots of the reviews that I've been reading have said that you've managed to, over, quarter of a century, build up the trust of the royal household. How is it that you have managed to get access to things like Operation London Bridge, that was the death of very senior royals, and indeed some of the rehearsals for the coronation? And what did you learn from them?
Well, I was very lucky to be there. Over the years I've written various books and documentaries, so I suppose you was just try to be fair. That's all you can do, is be fair, so that people think that
not sycophantic.
Not sycophantic, but it's straight.
Key.
You tell it straight, and no sort of side, no spin. And you don't need to. I mean, it's such an extraordinary story. But you say, watching the rehearsals for the coronation was as fascinating as watching the coronation itself.
Farcical, I heard.
Bits of it were sort of farcical. I mean, one rehearsal, they had a stand-in for the Queen. The crown was too big. They put the crown on her head. It went straight down to her shoulders. And everyone fell about laughing. Yeah. But it had that atmosphere of sort of family wedding in the offing. But there've been some very, very touching moments. And like I say, I mean, that period immediately after the death of the Queen, you had a period of great uncertainty. And don't forget, we had 2 prime ministers and 2 monarchs in a week, in 3 days, in fact.
Yes.
And that, for some countries, I mean, you change your head of state and your head of government in a week. I mean, that's time for riots and demos and coups. Yeah. We didn't have a shopping fire. We didn't have an angry word. It just happened because the monarchy brings this sort of sense of stability. But you still, you've got to get it right. And I thought that what was fascinating, that first speech she did on the day after the Queen died, when 52, when Elizabeth II came to the throne. We didn't hear her speak for 10 months until her Christmas broadcast. He was on the airwaves the next day. And that speech, I think, it sort of nailed it. It just said what needed to be said. And it was fascinating. The opinion polls afterwards gave him a 94% approval rating. Which,
but it was the longest apprenticeship in history.
It was. I mean,
he had plenty of time to prepare for such things.
He had, but he hadn't been... whereas the Crown, you mentioned the Crown, that's a very good point, because if you watch the Crown, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but if you do, there's this sort of plot line that he's itching to get his hands on it, and he keeps sort of, lobbying prime ministers to say, come on, let me have a go. Not the case at all. He was never, ever pushing his way in, which is why the Queen's authority was completely undiminished to the end.
And you talked about that period of instability, the removal of 2 prime ministers in short space of time and a new head of state. But we all heard the speech that King Charles made in the immediate aftermath. What we didn't know was what went on behind those closed doors. And it's you that has told us that actually that day that she received Liz Truss at Balmoral, one of her horses went on to win a race, and the household saying there that she was on great form before she went to bed for the last ever time.
Yeah, she was, as one of them said, she was buzzing. I think if you're monarch, your number one duty is to ensure good government and smooth running of the country. And the country had been a bit rudderless all summer, waiting for the Tories to get on with this leadership campaign. Finally, she's appointed a prime minister. Things are back on track. And she has a winner at Goodwood in the 305. And she just feels, that's a great relief. And then that night she went off to have dinner alone, and that was the last time.
There's a question I'm dying to ask you. I feel I can't, but I'm going to put it out there, but I don't expect an answer, which is, what did she die of? Well, are we not allowed to talk about that?
No, we can talk about it. It's a question, of course, people ask. And the reason that there's no sort of definitive answer is because at that age there was multiple causes, multiple conditions, which is why on her death certificate it says old age. And she's remarkable in that she's the first British monarch to have a death certificate, because under the old rules, if you die in England, monarchs don't have death certificates. It's only because they die in Scotland.
So this was likely to be heart failure?
We don't know.
Right, you talked about playing things with a straight bat and clear interpretations of things. Let's talk about Meghan and Harry now and this naming of their latest child, Lilibet. There is some confusion whether the Queen authorised that, knew about it, was asked whether they could use the name or not. How do you see that?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Eamonn. I mean, people have sort of interpreted this idea that the Queen was furious at the appropriation of her name. She was upset, very upset, and it wasn't to do with the name. It was the fact that afterwards, the couple, the Sussexes, let it be known that she'd given her blessing for this name. Use of Lillibut, her childhood nickname. And then the BBC, Johnny Diamond of the BBC actually broke the story that the Queen hadn't actually been asked. It had been a case of she'd been informed, oh, Granny, we're going to call her this. But it wasn't, can we have your blessing? So the BBC reported this, at which point the Sussexes reached for the lawyers and said, oh, you can't say that. You're implying, that she didn't have our blessing. And the Team Sussex then tried to get the palace to endorse their position. And that's the point at which the Queen figuratively said recollections may vary, that she wasn't going to be forced into saying something that she hadn't said.
So she was more or less informed that the name...
Well, we don't know the exact nature of the conversation, but yes, that it was presented to her rather than permission sought. Okay. That's the nub of the issue.
Yeah, and look, you're a respected royal biographer, and there are so many people who are on the sort of royal gravy train, if you will, people who are making a career out of gossip and speculation, but yours very much built on confidence and sources and fact. And you don't offer an opinion that often inside your book, but when you do, I suppose, therefore, it carries a bit more weight. So when you say that the Sussexes are easily offended and, effectively pretty prickly, what do you mean and what have you based that on?
Well, on numerous... their riposte to any given situation in their books, in their TV interviews. And let's not forget, there have been a lot of TV interviews, 6-part Netflix drama, Spare. You see time and again that they feel that they feel resentful. They feel that something hasn't gone their way, and that this is part of some sort of calculated campaign against them. And actually, I mean, when you've got a fast-moving story, I mean, for example, in my book, I go into those frantic hours after the death of the Queen, and everybody's trying to sort themselves out. And Harry writes in his book Spare how no one will return his calls, and he can't get through to anyone, and it's sort of it's just all a bit me. And actually, the whole kind of royal machine, if you like, is a team effort. And I just think it's very sad because, Harry and Meghan, they had such potential. And now when we do tend to hear from them, on a royal matter, it's just to say how miserable they were being royal. And that was, they were royal for whatever it was, 600-700 days. They're post-royal now for over twice that time.
Can you envisage a scenario where they're back in England and they're back in royal life?
I can't envisage a situation where they're back, as it were, as part of the sort of royal working unit, but I could certainly see it becoming a kind of normal thing for them to keep coming back. I hope so, because, it's a family at the end of the day, and they did have so much to give. I mean, when you look back on that sunny day in May 2018 and that sense of promise, all that they were going to be doing for the Commonwealth, I think that's very much what the now King, had in mind for the future. That there would be this sort of twin track. You'd have, William and Catherine, and you'd also have Harry and Meghan. And it's fundamentally, I think everyone's just sad. I think they're beyond being angry. It's just, but everyone would like to see some sort of rapprochement.
I'll refer you finally to the headline in The Sun today, a royal exclusive they call it. Camilla's advice to workaholic Charles, and there's the headline. She says, slow down. We expect him to have a procedure on his prostate gland this week alone. What's the likelihood of that?
I mean, I think it's very wise advice from Queen Camilla. I'm not sure it'll be heeded, because he genuinely likes hard work. I mean, it's not a platitude. I mean, I remember doing a film on him some years ago, and he's always up late at night writing letters and stuff. He enjoys writing letters. And people who work around him, they say, look, putting too much on his plate is not a problem, because he likes that. You might not see him in public, but he's having endless meetings. All this week, we haven't seen him in public much, but he's having meetings with charities, with different organisations, with ministers. That's what he's always been like. He is someone who is driven, and I think it's going to be very hard to get him to stop doing that. And also, he enjoys it. I mean, when we were doing this, I was doing the book and also a film alongside it. watching him going through his red boxes. I mean, red boxes are a bit of a chore, you know, lots of state papers, bits of sort of rather boring paperwork you've got to go through and sign off. You've got to read it first. And he's absolutely fascinated. And he wants to go through it. He likes doing this stuff because I think, as his late mother did, for the same reason, it's sort of saying, this is the point of me. This is what I do. This is why I'm here.
And can I ask you, for a slimmed-down monarchy, what a start to 2024. 3 royals, if you can include Fergie in that, all being unwell. Do you have any intel on the Princess of Wales? Is she OK? Because obviously we know all the details about Charles and Sarah Ferguson, but we just want reassurance, really, that the Princess of Wales is OK.
I mean, I'm just not surprised, but I believe, you know, to a degree, was not expecting the level of detail and candour that we've had about all 3, actually. And you know, I'm not privy to the Princess of Wales's health more than anyone else, but I mean, we all wish her well.
Absolutely.
And I just think it's a reminder that, yeah, we do have a slimmed-down royal family now, but they will adapt. They'll you know, they'll make it work, and it is a quiet royal time of year. I think by the spring, things will be back on track.
Good.
Well, Robert, we wish you well with your book,
Thank
Charles III, New King, New Court, the inside story. It's available in a bookshop near you.
Thank you. Thank you. Lovely talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Appreciate it. Right, do stay with us. Still to come, we're going to be taking a look at energy bills dropping drastically, relieving multiple households. That's in Making the News, up next.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Joining us to see what's making the news today is the broadcaster and journalist Claire Muldoon and the writer and podcaster Lewis Oakley. Good morning. Welcome back to both of you. Claire, you want to talk by cars growing by a couple of centimetres a year?
Yeah, well, 1 centimetre every 2 years.
Okay.
It's unrelenting because the people are so fixated on the big SUVs. The sales have gone through the roof, and yet it's James Nix, the analyst for Transport and Environment Campaign, said the author of the report on the trend said, spurred on by sales of the largest SUVs, vehicles are getting wider every year. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, it means that our roads weren't...
comfortable ride, beautiful engines, smooth. I mean, it's luxury, it's gorgeous.
Well, as I know, I used to have two, but I don't...
You used to have 2 SUVs?
Well, 1 SUV at a time, but I had 2 brands of them. But I'd no longer drive in. You know, you could turn down a thing and get fined.
Parking spaces, whatever.
Yeah, the growth in car size also causes issues for their drivers. The report found that largely luxury SUVs, which are about 2 metres wide, no longer fit in off-street parking.
That's true.
They also leave too little space for passengers to get in and out of the vehicles in typical off-street spaces, and they're about 2.4 metres wide, the report found. And I'll tell you, I was stuck in a bus last night trying to get home, and the buses couldn't move because the streets were too crammed with all of these massive cars either side.
Chelsea tractors.
And it was gridlocked.
Yeah, but maybe they're not the problem, maybe the buses are the problem.
The buses take people to their place of work and get
I'd
them
like
home.
to know when, because when I go through London, all I see is empty buses.
Well, you're lucky. Every time I'm on one, they're full.
Well, they're obviously only full at rush hour.
Well, that's even post-rush hour as well.
Well,
someone that is failing relentlessly his driving test. The idea of having bigger cars, because that was one of the things I failed on. I was driving too close to the other cars.
Oh, no.
So,
Your second rule.
You see, the thing is, property developers, when they do high-rise car parks or, you know, they build a multiplex cinema and there's a car park attached to it, that's not my fault that I can't fit into their space. It's their fault. So
well, it's all driven by money, isn't it? The more spaces that they have, the more people they can get in.
Exactly, but they need to have a responsibility to make spaces big enough for cars to park in. Yeah. I don't apologise for having a Chelsea tractor. It depends how it's powered or what. You know, as long as it's not spewing out pollution, then I don't see the problem.
They're not talking about that specifically. They're talking about the size of the car and the issues that has. Not the fact that anyone's got one.
You look at a 1930s house and the lean-to garage that will be beside it, and you say, good luck for putting a car in that. There'll be no car in that, you know?
Yeah.
So
there won't be. Anyway, it's getting bigger, so a bit like society. And
a bit like me. Yeah.
Right, let's talk about falling energy bills. Some more good news in terms of a few of them, the stories floating around this morning. And this is, what, from April onwards?
So rare good news. Energy bills are set to fall by £430 a year, and that's going down 16% from April. And they're saying that the reason why is because we've had a milder winter, so the gas demand has been a bit lower. And also those Red Sea attacks actually haven't driven up prices as much as they thought. Although I will caveat it with this article ends with a spokesperson from Uswitch saying, look, don't get too excited. The future looks quite uncertain. So let's take the wins and take the energy price savings.
I'll tell you, one of the other reasons it'll be falling is that people don't switch on their energy now, and people can't afford to. So they sit in blankets, or they have fleeces on, or they're just very, very careful about when they actually turn that on, and that's a good thing.
Well, it's a good thing, but that we're aware of it, but also we don't want people to be freezing to death in the comfort of their own home. Where's the comfort in that? I mean, we're supposed to be able to live. You know, it's a fundamental right. It's shelter, food and water, and we would think heating. But there is such a dearth of money in this country at the moment for people to pay out for essential services like this that it really has to be addressed.
It's interesting work from home hasn't affected this. So I will say whenever I'm on Zoom calls or Teams
That's because they're not working, most of them.
We work, Eamonn, we work. But they're always in, like, their coats because they don't put the heating on in the day. So I'll go on calls and people are just sat there in their coats, which I always think is a bit odd.
OK, let me ask you a question. Why is it that men are less likely to feel the cold than women? So a man, for instance, could walk around the house in his coat and feel this is quite an adventure, this is good, but no woman would.
Oh, I've been walking around in my house in a coat. Trust me.
Yes, but you live in a barn. You live, you know, it's women
we do
are
feel the
cold
more.
sensitive.
Yeah.
Much more
it's just
cold
biology,
sensitive.
isn't it?
Well, I'm not, because I'm from Glasgow and there's nothing sensitive about me.
I am a bit mean with my other half, because she'd be like, do you want to put the heating on? I'm like, no. I'm fine. Yeah. Do you want to put the heating on?
Right, Claire, let's talk about COVID secrecy. Nicola Sturgeon's been getting a bit of stick and lots of question marks about where exactly all the WhatsApp messages have gone and why they can't be provided to the COVID inquiry.
Yeah, well...
A bit familiar, this old...
Well, isn't it just? We had it at Westminster as well. But, you know, Sturgeon was always held up as the paradigm, the poster girl of COVID, and how she dealt with it and how she directed her cabal of the SNP and caroled the Scottish people to it. But the COVID inquiry, we're now on day 6 of this Scottish COVID inquiry, and we've found that her top doctor told colleagues to erase messages. And one of the people he told to erase the message was dentist Jason Leach, who was in charge of the of telling Sturgeon basically what to do in terms of the health and wealth of the economy and people's livelihoods. Sir Gregor Smith, Scotland's Chief Medical Officer, encouraged the practice in a conversation with Graham Ellis, an expert in geriatric medicine, on July 14th, 2021. Now, that date is significant because the British government, the UK government, had told all devolved governments, Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland, 3 times the month before, once in the month before that, July 2021, to keep every single record.
Why then would the most senior doctor in the whole of Scotland direct otherwise?
Well, you wonder that, and let's hope the inquiry finds out why they've done it. But it all came from the top. I mean, she has deleted messages, but then says, "Oh, I've got notes made," and although the notes were made contemporaneously, I've kept them, and they're here. I just don't believe a word that comes out of her mouth,
They have got like their rationale for it. They're saying that they were deleting them in line with government policy and that all the important stuff was documented on email. I mean, I don't believe any of that. I think it's outrageous.
No, the number of government...
They're trying to defend themselves.
What was it, a factory reset on his phone?
Yeah.
And all of his messages disappeared. And Boris Johnson, he changed phones and all of his had disappeared. So...
But it just means that they know. They know what they were up to and what they were doing was not right, and they don't want it out there, and that's how decisions were made that affected literally all of our lives.
It just means we don't know.
Claire, why? Yep. Tell me about Mean Girls and what you mean by Mean Girls. And this is Generation Z, is it, or Z, or what?
Gen Zs. Now, Gen Zs were born between 97 to 2012.
Right.
So I've got, my daughters are 3 Gen Zers then, but I don't identify with the way that these girls are. But they're saying that Gen Zs are actually turning on millennials. And you would think that, you know, feminism, women's rights and everything, you think that women would be more cohesive, would be more collegiative, would be more collective together. No, not these Gen Zers.
I don't know. I get muddled who's what. So the younger ones are turning on what age?
The millennials. The millennials are 80s to 96.
OK.
OK? So what they're saying is they're ageist. Okay. They're horrible. We don't like them. My definition of a Gen Zer, regardless of sex or gender, is, do you drink oat milk or do you not?
I do think it's odd that you always get this idea of Gen Z and people always tell you that, oh, they're the nicest, they're the most compassionate, they're really woke. You meet them, and I've got to say, I mean, don't want to write off a whole generation, but they're really not. I always make the point that, I mean, I know this is about the girls, but on the boys' side, it's Gen Z that made people like Andrew Tate famous. So the idea that they're massively woke and compassionate people, be honest with yourselves.
Yeah. Good point.
There we go.
Well, it's really sad, and I'm glad I'm not a youngster now. And
you two are freelancers, and therefore, if you're not working, you're not getting paid.
Yep.
So the advice to King Charles from Queen Camilla is to slow down with his age and his health. He's 75, I think. Yeah, 75. And she's saying, look, get a grip. But he's waited so long for this job, Lewis. He's waited so long for it.
The hardest thing is he's waited his entire life for it. He's like, what, a year or 2 in, and now he's being told, oh, pull back a little bit. He's not going to do that. I think as well, You know, when you tell older people to slow down, like, they need to tell you themselves, because I think, you know, a lot of people retire and then they just sort of lose a lot of their mobility or whatever it is. I think that if he is happy with what he's doing, he feels like he can do it, he should keep going. It's not on other people to be telling you to slow down. I've seen so many...
That's what other people excel in. They specialise in, oh, at your age, or at your stage.
No, but it's done with love. I mean, the Queen's saying that with love, and people say that to you, it's done with love, and, you know, people don't want him to burn out, because, you know, he's
but he's not...
We only just got him.
But he's not going to burn out, and Lewis quite put that so well. He's waited his whole life for this.
Yeah, but he's also having a health wobble, so that, you know...
Well, I know, I can see straight away. If I waited till I'm 74 or so to get the top job, I'm going to be in that job for as long as possible.
Absolutely. He probably feels a lot of pressure as well. How do you ever live up to your mother's legacy, and you've only got a limited amount of time because she came into it a lot younger? So he's going to go for
I wonder if the streamlining of the royal family, as Princess Anne highlighted that it wasn't perhaps the best idea.
Yes.
I wonder if that's having an impact on him.
Too much pressure on
How many visits did he do last year? How many?
More than anyone else.
516 engagements.
That's almost one a day. Well, 2 a day.
And Princess Anne, who's no spring chicken either.
She's
did
a hard-working royal. She's fantastic.
Yeah, Camilla does a lot. I always thought it was nonsense to talk about a slimmed-down royal. People love to see the royals, or anybody. They love to see me, they love to see Isabel, they love to, you know, people love recognition. That people will turn up at their scout hall or whatever and say, well done, you've done a good job. Can I have a picture with you? Yes. That's what people want. And you don't need to slim down. And this is all about pressure, about public purse and paying for them and all that. Well, he's got enough money to he could be paying for them out of his own pocket, he could be. But no, I don't think a slimline royalty is a good idea.
No, I agree with you.
But the other two gone off to California, so they're not going to be.
Them in the royal family.
They're not going to be included in it.
No.
So do you bring in Eugenie and Beatrice?
Maybe not. But maybe the Duke of Edinburgh and his wife make more use of Sophie and Edward.
I think they're working hard. They're working pretty hard. Yeah. So you've run out of numbers, really.
Well, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
we're coming more to a Republican than ever before.
Oh, let's roll out the kids, get the kids working, get George and
get them
Charlotte
down those mines.
Charlotte would nail it, wouldn't she? She's already got the weight down and the smile.
They have been trained well. They have.
Yeah, and you know what? People do turn out to see them. Whenever they turn out, people are delighted.
Their box office.
They are. Yeah. Especially that Louis.
Claire Muldoon, Lewis Oakley, it's been a joy. It's been a pleasure. Come back and see us again sometime. Thank you very much indeed. And that's it from the guys today. We're going to take a break. You've got the weather coming your way, and then we've got everything we've been talking about from 9 o'clock all over again. Good morning, Aidan.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. This time yesterday, we were reeling from Storm Isha. Today, it's all about Storm Jocelyn, the next storm on the way, bringing spells of rain and then increasingly strong winds overnight tonight. First of all, it's a dry start in the east, doesn't last long. Rain sweeps across the country, heaviest over Western Hills, where there could be some issues for central and southwest Scotland, as well as northwest England, 40 to 60 millimetres of rain falling in some places. Not as much rain towards the southeast, but still dull and damp. It is mild, however, despite the wet and increasingly windy weather, 12 or 13, perhaps even 14 Celsius possible. But the winds really start to ramp up as we end the afternoon and go into the evening, widely 55 to 65 miles an hour for the northern two-thirds of the country, particularly western coasts and hills. But for the north and west of Scotland, a swathe of 80-mile-per-hour gusts move through overnight. And now, this is more of a normal winter storm compared with Storm Isha, not as powerful, but coming so quickly after Isha could hamper recovery and repair efforts. That's why this one has been named. That's why there is an amber warning for the north and west of Scotland. It stays blustery into tomorrow morning. A bright start in the south, further showers to come for northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland. The most frequent showers will be across the north and west of Scotland with a continued strong wind, but the winds will be coming down through the day and with some brightness in the south, feeling a little more pleasant. Highs here of 11 to 12 Celsius, a bit cooler further north.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Carson, this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nine o'clock. We're approaching quickly and fastly on this Tuesday, the 23rd of January. Wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening, you're tuned into Breakfast with me, Eamonn Holmes, and her, Isabel Webster.
And you're very welcome. And here's what we've been discussing this morning on Breakfast. Overnight, the UK and the United States have conducted their second joint attacks on Houthi military targets in Yemen, striking an underground storage site, missile storage and surveillance facilities. The Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, has spoken earlier today on the government's decision to conduct the strikes.
What the Houthis are doing is unacceptable, it's illegal, and it's threatening the freedom of navigation. That's why we've taken the action.
Mark White in the studio. He'll have all the latest.
Well, a second set of strikes launched by the UK will, of course, raise concerns that we're being dragged ever deeper into a Middle East conflict.
Isha out, Jocelyn in. Another day, another major storm is set to sweep across the UK, bringing with it heavy winds, rain and more travel chaos.
Let's go to Ed McGivern. He'll give you a flavour of the weather picture.
Hot on the heels of Storm Isha, today Storm Jocelyn hits the UK with winds strengthening overnight and causing further impacts. I'll have the full details in the forecast coming up soon.
Coming up at the end of the programme, we will recap on our interview with royal author Robert Hardman about his latest book on King Charles III.
And don't forget to get in touch. You can join in any of our discussions. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.com.
Britain and America have carried out their second joint airstrikes against Houthi targets in Yemen.
Well, this follows 7 rounds of airstrikes on Houthi military sites by the US in recent days and comes after the UK took part in an initial joint strike operation earlier this month against the rebel group.
All of this was overnight, and in a statement, the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, said the latest round of strikes were in self-defence.
Well, meanwhile, the Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, said the UK will continue to degrade Houthis' ability to carry out any further attacks.
Let's be absolutely clear, we have no quarrel with the Yemeni people. Indeed, our aid feeds over 100,000 Yemenis every month, using the sea lane, delivering that aid, which is precisely the sea lane that the Houthis are trying to close. Since we last took action, 10 days ago, there have been over 12 attacks on shipping by the Houthis in the Red Sea. These attacks are illegal, they're unacceptable. And what we've done, again, is send the clearest possible message that we will continue to degrade their ability to carry out these attacks, whilst sending the clearest possible message that we back our words and our warnings with action.
Well, earlier we also spoke to the Shadow Health Minister, Karen Smith, about the situation and about whether or not the opposition had been informed of the strikes.
We don't know why the government haven't spoken to us on the usual terms. We would expect them to do that, and we would certainly expect a statement by the Prime Minister today in Parliament, so we will await developments on that today.
For the government, the Minister of State at the Department of Transport, Hugh Merriman, reiterated the importance of international shipping.
We cannot stand by and let international shipping come under attack. And that's, we're sort of full square behind that mission with our allies across the world, and that will continue. So we call on the Houthis and those that back them, including the Iranians, to step back and allow international shipping to be safe.
Right, our security editor, Mark White, on this one now. Mark, where are we going with all of this? Lord Cameron saying 12 days ago we carried out strikes, but to no avail, it appears. Why would this be any different?
Well, that's the question. Where are we going? I mean, you heard there from Lord Cameron saying that since those first strikes, the Houthis had launched 12 separate strikes on shipping in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. They seem determined to continue doing that. If that's the case, then again, Lord Cameron saying that we will continue to degrade the Houthis. So are we headed for a much deeper conflict in the Middle East again, this time against the Houthi rebels in Yemen, who, remember, over a good number of years resisted a very sustained campaign by a well-armed military, that military being the Saudi Arabian military.
But what gets me, we don't seem to need much encouragement getting involved in this conflict.
Well, I think that's potentially a legitimate question. There are no other countries in terms of actual military assets involved apart from the US and the UK. France isn't involved. Germany isn't involved. Many other European countries that also benefit from the shipping going through. I will say, from the point of view of other European countries, they are putting assets down there to protect the ships from missile strikes from the Houthi rebels, but what they're not doing is actually taking part in any direct attacks on the Houthis.
So a strange sort of situation whereby the Speaker of the Commons and indeed Sir Keir Starmer not being told or briefed about this before, and I think there have to be questions about, you know, the sort of democratic process and whether or not we as British citizens need to know a little bit more about what's going on here if we are being dragged into a war, because at the moment the way we're doing seeing it. Not only are we sort of hearing about it secondhand, but also sort of a laborious way flying in from Akrotiri into this region, unlike the Americans who've actually got warships and assets there, which isn't as expensive or much more sensible way of doing it.
Yeah, in terms of notifying key politicians, I think that's a bit of a storm in a teacup, to put it mildly. I'm sure that Sir Keir Starmer and Sir Lindsay Hoyle were told initially that, you know, we are conducting these strikes. They are conducted in the hope that they will be limited, but clearly, if the Houthis continue to escalate, then there is a possibility of further action. Are we expecting to call them in every time, potentially, the UK gets involved? Well, maybe. But yes, that second point with regard to our military assets is 3,000 plus mile round trip down to Yemen and back again that these RAF Typhoons have to carry out. Now, they do that, of course, but it's not the ideal way. The ideal way is the way that the Americans have done it with USS Eisenhower, their aircraft carrier in the Red Sea, much closer to Yemen to carry out these strikes.
The Americans could have done this on their own. Why did they need us involved?
Well, there's a symbolism there, you know, shoulder to shoulder. But yes, in shoulder to shoulder, there is a legitimate question again to be asked. Are we in any way equipped to be able to get involved in a conflict? We're already spending billions of pounds every year that we're giving to the Ukrainian government for their military campaign against Russia. Our military is in a powerless state, to say the very least. Any escalation of a conflict against Yemen is, of course, going to cost us in monetary terms, but also in terms of providing the assets that we seem so short of at the moment.
Yeah, it's like a lose-lose for the taxpayer, because we're being told this is, you know, to avoid huge escalation in costs with supply chain interruption and, you know, all of our goods going up in price, but also the cost of policing this strait and getting involved in any kind of escalation. I mean, weapons and keeping a military fully supplied as well is astronomical.
So if that's what we're doing and that's what it's costing us, who's supplying the Houthis? Where's their hardware coming from?
One name, Iran. It's what you call a proxy of Iran, supported, funded, trained, advised by the Iranian government. They also do the same for Hezbollah in southern Lebanon.
Iran?
Oh, my. you really want a war in your hands. I think there's no way that the US and UK have any appetite at all for getting involved in any kind of conflict with Iran.
OK.
I suppose we ought to mention what's happened very briefly, if we can, with these IDF soldiers in Gaza and escalation of the situation there.
Well, of course, this is relevant because the Houthis say that the reason they're involved in the first place in targeting shipping is it's shipping they claim that was linked to Israel and showing solidarity and support for the Palestinians. Again, overnight claims that 190 Palestinians have been killed, but very significantly on the Israeli side, 21 IDF soldiers killed in a single incident. They were trying to blow up two buildings linked to Hamas. Rocket-propelled grenade was fired at them, set off those explosives prematurely, and the buildings came down on top of those soldiers.
Terrible situation. Mark, thanks for bringing us up to date. So all of that action, those strikes, happened overnight while you were sleeping. Mark White, thank you.
Now, the 10th named storm this winter season, Storm Jocelyn, is making its way to the United Kingdom.
Heavy rain, strong winds are expected by tea time tonight. The Met Office has issued a danger to life alert as this whole storm builds up.
Well, joining us now is our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie, and the GB News reporter, Jack Carson. Good morning to you both. First of all, to you, Doogie, and bring us up to date on the situation there, because Northern Ireland having a tough 48 hours, it seems.
It is indeed, and I'm actually standing on the main thoroughfare into Belfast from Downpatrick, Crossgar and Saintfield. This road is usually absolutely packed with traffic. It's one of those roads that people say never stops. It is the main commuter route into Belfast, and it is empty at the moment. You can just see there's a digger starting to arrive here, and that's because of what has happened. And this is a real problem for Northern Ireland with the strikes that have went on. If you just zoom in on that you can see there that the electricity has come down on this main road. The Electricity Board has just arrived here, and that is because of what's happened right beside us here. If I just walk you up a little bit, you can see there is a huge tree across the road. Now, these trees, evergreen trees, are they keep their leaves on them all year, of course, but that also means that they are full of water at all stages, and they become extremely heavy and act like a sail. And you can see here this tree is quite a size. It has came the whole way across the main road and brought down the electricity lines. Now, the Forestry Commission here in Northern Ireland are on strike because of public sector strikes over pay and what's going on in Stormont, and they're not out to cut up these trees. So there is a lot of private tree surgeon companies out running about cutting up the trees, but the Electricity Board have decided this morning basically to bring in a digger and trail this tree off the road in order that they can reconnect the power on the other side. And of course, when you have trees and everything else lying on the roadsides, well then when the rain really starts to come in, well, it adds to the flooding process that has been plaguing us all the whole way through Great Britain in this last few months. So things here are quite bad because they can't get what has already happened cleared, that they're now having to fight fire with fire, if you know what I mean, as in they're trying to clear what's coming or what has been before what's coming. And the Electricity Board, who are really top class in Northern Ireland, I've got to say that, are doing their very best to restore power to houses with that challenge. And of course, yesterday we then had the big storm that brought down those very, very significant trees in the dark hedges. Beautiful area of Northern Ireland, brings in a lot of tourism, and the dark hedges, of course, 3 trees in there lost. Those trees are 250 years old, and they mean an awful lot to the community up in round that area of the North Antrim coast because of the amount of tourism they bring in. And there's a real worry now that more maintenance needs to be done on those hedges in order that they keep them alive.
You know, those trees, I remember them, the road is built on bogland, and the trees are amazing because their roots intertwine under the road and they help support the road there. But what's going to happen? These are not the only trees in the dark hedges that have been lost over the past few years. Do they replace these, Dougie, or are they lost forever once they go?
Well, they will replace them, and they have been replacing them, but you can imagine they're 250 years old and they grow through one another across the road and make such a beautiful archway, such an iconic scene, especially in the snow. I still am a very keen photographer, and many times I used to travel up there along with my father on a Sunday or whatever, and we used to take pictures in different seasons of the dark hedges and in round the North Antrim coast. And yes, we won't see the benefits of those new plants, but maybe my grandchildren or great-grandchildren will possibly see it. And we really hope that the groups that are looking after those hedges, there is a group for that they continue to plant and continue their maintenance with that area for many generations to come.
Big tourist attraction for us as well. I also, Dougie, know exactly where you are on that road.
Getting homesick.
Yeah, I know those trees. You're talking about those Leyland trees that are there. But I noticed that on either side of the fallen tree there's a queue of traffic. So how long will those folk, I mean, are they being just overly optimistic queuing up there, or how long may they expect to wait there?
Well, either side of those trees now, the road is closed on the far side. What we're actually seeing on the other side is the Electricity Board vehicles that are just arriving here as the shifts are changing over. And down behind me there is the lorry that's brought the digger in order to clear this.
Yeah,
but really, it's quite fascinating to watch. And somebody comes from an agricultural background, because these trees, the roots are still embedded here. So they're going to have to either saw through them, because they can't actually just put the digger bucket in and pull it out, because the bank that is here, in order to keep the field up in there and not have water washing down into the road, they're going to have to go the whole way around with this digger right into that field behind us and try to shore the bank as they take the tree out. So there's an awful lot more to this than meets the eye, and there's another 3 trees in the same position further on down the road. So traffic is really now being diverted off this main road onto very, very small back roads that have also had trees coming down. And in fact, this morning on the way here in the darkness, I came across a tree that was on my side of the road, and it just over the brow of a hill, and it was sticking out into the middle of the road, and a lorry came the other way. How I missed it, I do not know. But with heavy rain on the windscreen, the darkness, you know, it is very, very dangerous. And I appeal to anybody in Northern Ireland at this minute in time that is driving in those conditions, please be careful.
Go steady yourself as well, Doogie. Thanks very much.
Just telling you, Doogie, sorry, I've got to go because there's a phone call coming in for you from Country File offering you a job there. That's the future for you, my friend. For the moment, thank you.
Let's go from Northern Ireland, hop across to North Wales, where Jack Carson is standing by for us. What's the picture like where you are?
Yeah, well, certainly in the last hour since we last spoke, the wind has really picked up here. That yellow warning from the Met Office for wind in parts of South Wales and North Wales not coming in until around 11, 12 o'clock today, but already across here at the seafront in Porthcawl, it is already really whipping up. Now, we're at low tide at the moment, which is probably good news, because when it is high tide here, particularly with those really strong winds, the waves crash and break these sea barriers regularly. It is usually quite a sight to see, but so far just the wind, but certainly picking up as Storm Jocelyn comes across the Arctic and really starts to hit the UK. Just, of course, that 24 hours after Storm Isha caused so much chaos across the UK on transport networks and for homes, leaving some of them without power.
Thank you very much indeed. Britain's newsroom at 9:30 with Andrew and Bev. Guys, what are you going to be doing?
Talking about the threat to the Royal Mail on Saturday. We know the Royal Mail is desperate to ditch it, but they can't in law. We're talking to the head of the communication works in General Secretary Dave Ward, who's coming on first time, I think, on GB News.
And we've already been debating this Alzheimer's drug. If you knew you were going to get Alzheimer's in 15 years, would you want to know? I think it's a really interesting discussion.
Wouldn't.
I wouldn't want to know. Not unless there was something I could do about it.
What are new treatments coming through?
Not quick enough.
Yeah, and my father had Alzheimer's, and Mum was great with him, but it was pretty miserable. I'm not sure I'd want to know that.
I wouldn't worry. If you've got Alzheimer's, you probably forget anyway.
But that's the point, I suppose, is you have 15 years of being well and worrying unnecessarily. And it might be that the test isn't 100% nailed on. It might be that there is no treatment. Anyway, it's a great debate.
It is a good debate.
Great debate.
That and a lot more. And Trump, of course, tonight in the big debate. We're going to be looking forward to that.
Okay.
Guys,
thanks,
thank you very much indeed. Right after the break, royal author Robert Hardman. He's got a new book out about King Charles III. That's next.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Acclaimed royal biographer Robert Hardman released his latest book, which details the rule of King Charles III. It's called Charles III, New King, New Court, The Inside Story.
And earlier he popped in to speak to us. And if you missed it, don't worry, here are the highlights.
Well, it's been an extraordinary year and a bit, really, since, of course, the passing of the longest-lived, longest-reigning, many would say greatest monarch of all times, Elizabeth II. And, you know, a hell of a pair of shoes to step into and a lot of challenges for the king. But I've been following him and being in and around the royal orbit since
You talk about shoes to step into. What about Queen Camilla? And the Princess of Wales, the then Princess of Wales, Diana, stepping into her shoes, because Camilla, let's not forget, was completely vilified. And am I alone in thinking that Charles and Camilla are very independent, very dependent on each other, and they complement each other very, very well?
They're a great double act. Queen Camilla is sort of central to the way that this reign has got off to a great start. I mean, it really has been, you know, it's solid, and when you look at the political instability around us, you need sort of one institution that's sort of entirely dependable, and Queen Camilla is part of that. That period immediately after the death of the Queen, you had a period of great uncertainty. And don't forget, we had 2 prime ministers and 2 monarchs in a week, in 3 days, in fact.
Yes.
And that, for some countries, I mean, you change your head of state and your head of government in a week. I mean, that's time for, you know, riots and demos.
Coups.
And coups. Yeah. We didn't have a shopping fire. We didn't have an angry word. It just happened because the monarchy brings this sort of sense of stability. But you still, you know, you've got to get it right. And I thought that what was fascinating, that first speech she did on the day after the Queen died, when 52, when Elizabeth II came to the throne. We didn't hear her speak for 10 months until her Christmas broadcast. He was on the airwaves the next day. And that speech, I think, it sort of nailed it. It just said what needed to be said.
And Robert Hardman's book is out now. We're going to be out again tomorrow morning from 6 o'clock right through till about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. No, it's not. It's 9:30.
It feels like that sometimes. But up next, you've got Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Bev. See you tomorrow.
Have a good day.
Hello, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. This time yesterday, we were reeling from Storm Isha. Today, it's all about Storm Jocelyn, the next storm on the way, bringing spells of rain and then increasingly strong winds overnight tonight. First of all, it's a dry start in the east, doesn't last long. Rain sweeps across the country, heaviest over Western Hills, where there could be some issues for central and southwest Scotland, as well as northwest England, 40 to 60 millimetres of rain falling in some places. Not as much rain towards the southeast, but still dull and damp. It is mild, however, despite the wet and increasingly windy weather, 12 or 13, perhaps even 14 Celsius possible. But the winds really start to ramp up as we end the afternoon and go into the evening. Widely 55 to 65 miles an hour for the northern two-thirds of the country, particularly western coasts and hills. But for the north and west of Scotland, a swathe of 80-mile-per-hour gusts moved through overnight. And now, this is more of a normal winter storm compared with Storm Isha, not as powerful, but coming so quickly after Isha could hamper recovery and repair efforts. That's why this one has been named. That's why there is an amber warning for the north and west of Scotland. It stays blustery into tomorrow morning. A bright start in the south, further showers to come for Northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland. The most frequent showers will be across the north and west of Scotland with a continued strong wind, but the winds will be coming down through the day, and with some brightness in the south, feeling a little more pleasant. Highs here of 11 to 12 Celsius, a bit cooler further north.
Very good morning. We've got a great show coming up. The Rwanda bill, blooming lords.
Led by a bishop, trying to stop it all, delay it all. Also, Saturday postal services. The Royal Mail want to get rid of it. We're talking to the trade union leader leading the fight to keep it.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News.